She floated, almost ethereal in her light gown, a faint smile gracing her lips as if remembering a sweet dream. A gentle embrace, as if she was trying to gather every piece of him, cherishing this stolen moment in time. He tilted his head back, trying to recall the warmth of her embrace, but it was slowly fading away. He reached up as if grasping at a half-remembered dream, the echo of her touch still tingling in his fingertips. Rain lashed against the window, mirroring the turmoil within him as he remembered her ethereal smile, now just a ghost in the storm. The sterile room felt colder than it was, her absence chilling him to the core, a constant dull ache. The pills sat accusingly on the table, a stark reminder of a fractured mind and a love now lost in the ether. Drizzle painted the glass, each drop a tiny tear mirroring the quiet despair clinging to the room. A voice, soft and somehow surprised, echoed around the room, making the rain's patter on the glass sound like a warm welcome. The question hung in the air, heavy as the silence that followed. The mere thought drained the last color from his face. The therapist's suggestion hung in the air, a loaded question hinting at depths he wasn't sure he wanted to plunge into again. He nervously scribbled in the file, hoping his colleague wouldn't notice the tremor in his hands as he continued to work. The slide of the hand indicated a fresh page as the rain splattered on the window. Conversation on paper it would have to be. Right, that's how it used to be, he thinks. He stared blankly at the seascape painting, the waves a mocking reminder of the peace he couldn't find within himself. He sprinted across the beach, brandishing the toy, but a chilling announcement hung in the air. Hye-seong was killed. A manic grin stretched across his face as the chilling announcement pierced his eardrums. What wild chaos would come next? Hye-seong, now a record-breaking 3,000 meters under the sea, continued sprinting as a manic energy pulsed through the air. Hye-seong's grin was wide, a flash of teeth in the dim light, a reckless dive, as if he had all the time in the world. Hye-seong tottered along the path, holding the odd toy aloft like a strange offering to whatever guardian lurked in the shadows. The tapping grew louder as Hye-seong paused, toy in hand, staring up into the dark maw of the cave, a question forming in his mind. Hye-seong flinched, a cold sweat slicking his brow, his certainty hardening into a sharp-edged fear that someone was in the cave with him. Bare feet tread on the cold floor, each step a protest. There was a heavy sigh that seemed to ripple through the very air. Hye-seong froze. The air vibrated with a sound both unexpected and unnerving. A child's voice echoed from the cave's depths. Hye-seong clutches the toy tightly as he walks, each step echoing as the child's voice resonates from the cave. He stood rigid, a statue carved from grief, as the words echoed in his mind. My beloved husband. Oh, what had he done? The uniform felt heavy, each thread a painful reminder, the voice bouncing in his skull, torturing his very being. The boy's voice trembled as he spoke, his worry palpable, a silent promise to protect her from whatever lurked in the shadows. The toy clattered to the floor, a childish relic now, a stark reminder of innocence lost in the face of growing dread. With a heavy thud it falls, a cruel reminder of childish things, now drowned by the cave's eerie song. His eyes widened, a cold dread crawling up his spine as the child's eerie voice echoed out of the cave. Her voice was soft and melancholic, a siren's song laced with sorrow as she whispered, "A mer." Perhaps something was to be revealed. The child's voice whispered, an incredulous question hanging in the air. A mermaid? Was this the start of his bizarre adventure? A web of sorrow clung to her. Was she the spider or the prey in this mysterious mermaid's game? What secrets lay ahead? Confusion contorted his face as the cave floor erupted, sending debris flying. What strange force was at play here? She floated, suspended in an emerald dreamscape. The mermaid? Her eyes opened, a glimmer of confusion mixed with serene acceptance. The mermaid slowly rose to the surface, still slightly confused, but now she was ready to make some new friends. Hye-seong's jaw dropped. Before him, in the shallow waters, sat a figure unlike any he'd seen before. With a bright smile, he announced his shirt was now on offer, his good deed for the day done. He was still reeling, but plowed onwards. "Anyways, are you really a mermaid?" he asks with anticipation. She blinked, a shy smile gracing her lips as she assured him she'd keep his secret. Loneliness was her curse. He asks her name, but her response is flat. She has no name. His shock, of course, bubbled up in a second question. Hexiong floated, still drifting in the sea of dreams as she stated she had no name. Is that so? He thought. Confusion clouds her features as she repeats the name. Yunhai? Why did it feel so achingly familiar to her? With a grin splitting his face, he extended his hand towards her. Nice to meet you, Yunhai. Let's get along. Hyeseong offers a hand with a shrug. Just grab on, he says to the strange figure bobbing in the water. With a gentle grasp, Hyeseong found himself saying the obvious. Shaking hands is for getting along better. Giggles bubbled up, the simple joy of connection sparking bright. He was making a friend, a real-life mermaid. An echo of loneliness, she speaks of a past devoid of friendship, a childhood spent longing for someone her own age. Hyeseong coughed, sputtering. How could mermaid food be so overwhelmingly salty, he wondered with a grimace. Yunhai clutches the item, regret clouding her face as she admits if human, she would have brought a gift too. Hyeseong watched Yunhai bob, confessing he wanted to be a mermaid so he could swim well, just like her. A shiver ran down his spine. Not like my uncool self. Who's scared of water? He asked, mostly to no one. Hyeseong tilted his head, a frown deepening. How could someone be scared of something as amazing as the ocean? Her voice dropped, heavy with sadness. Her father's boat accident still haunted the quiet shores. The words hung heavily. When he passed away, a bead of sweat trickled down Hyeseong's brow, the excitement of their encounter fading, replaced by a looming sense of what came next. Yunhai looked concerned, her hands resting on the ground. She asked if he would be scared when they went into the sea. Hyeseong's mind swirled. She was a mermaid and scared of the ocean? He stares blankly, unsure of what to make of this. Yunhai nervously wondered if he would save her if she started to drown, to which he confidently said he'd make sure she wouldn't. Hyeseong took a deep breath. He'd promised to protect her. A mermaid scared of the ocean? This was going to be interesting. Hyeseong, legs shaking, declines Yunhai's offer, stubbornly pushing himself up on unsteady legs as she offers assistance. He struggles for breath, a desperate grasp at his shirt as panic swells within him. He's going into the sea. A sharp intake of breath, cold and shocking, stole into his lungs as he dove into the ocean depths. A splash echoes. With a desperate surge, Yunhai gripped him tightly, her hand like a vice. They would be going to the sea. Gasping, his heart hammers, ocean water burning his throat. Yunhai's worried gaze mirrors his own fear of the deep unknown. A silent plea escaped her lips as the cold water enveloped them. Would he be okay in the sea? Through the water's veil, Yunhai's voice rings out, echoing with worry. Had she pushed him too far into the deep? Panic swelled within Hyeseong. His skin felt cold and his eyes darted wildly, confirming his worst fears. He was deep underwater. The seawater enveloped him completely. His fear now was that he could not breathe anymore. Panic seized him, and he desperately begged for help as his grip on the world above slipped away into the deep abyss. Their hands clasped tight, a promise whispered in the silent language of touch. Maybe everything would be okay. With a swish, Hyeseong's bare feet sink into the unknown. He's committed, plunging into the ocean's mysterious depths. He sputtered, choked by the salty kiss of the ocean, his face contorting in a grimace of pure, unadulterated panic. Yunhai tugs at his sleeve, eyes wide with wonder, urging him to look, but the salty water stings his eyes. Deeper now, Yunhai can't help but tease. How's it? Still scary? As he clutches her hand, eyes wide. Hyeseong, now deep in the water, nods slightly, offering a weak smile to Yunhai, his determination unwavering. Did it hurt? The question loomed, the simple word yes scrawled beneath it, a world of pain hiding behind it. Deeper and deeper they descended, the surface world growing more and more distant as the rocks grew larger around them. Dread filled the air, knowing that the end was near. He swallowed hard, wanting just one last goodbye. Would he be okay? Hyeseong, blue-tinged and shivering, blurted out his fear. Seoul had no sea. Was he dreaming or drowning? Hyeseong's teeth chattered, but a wobbly smile stretched across his face. He was still in shock, but okay, he managed. His eyes widen with an intense emotion, shock and disbelief washing over him as she proclaims eternal friendship. A toy submarine bobbed playfully. How far could their adventure go? Would this world be as wild as it appeared? Tears welled as he firmly declared he was handing it over, come what may. Time to take the plunge, whether he was ready or not. Hyeseong ponders the day's events. Was he really friends with a mermaid? How absurd. And yet, a smile tugged at his lips. A thud echoes in the eerily pale room as the mermaid doll hits the floor, more childhood memories falling away. His mind swirled with a strange, mixed melancholy. What's wrong with me? He pondered, knowing it was time to let go. The faucet creaked as he wrenched it open, the water running thick and brown like the despair in his soul. The water gushed, cold against his skin, but he couldn't wash away the shock of their underwater chat. He's got some reflecting to do. He cupped his hands, catching the drips. It wasn't the sea, but maybe, just maybe, a little bit of the sadness would wash away. His reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, the bathroom's stark light unforgiving. Was this really him? The man who befriended a mermaid? A strange chill snaked up his spine as he examined his reflection in the mirror. The mermaid adventure felt distinctly creepy. He screamed, voice raw with panic, as a vice-like grip tightened around his hand, fear making him scream for freedom. A startled gasp ripped through the silence. The grip tightened and a choked whisper escaped. "Who are you?" A caress in the form of water swirled, and the water was hot, but it can't wash the strange mermaid adventure away. The grip tightened, her voice echoing, "Hold my hands." Was this a request or a command, he wondered, shivers dancing on his skin. Gasping, he clutched his chest, feeling his soul escape. Had he gone too far? He could hear the whispers, the command, "Hold my hands." Hands intertwined, a delicate connection blooms in the depths, binding two souls together, come what may. A cold sweat trickled down his face. No way, he thought. Not even I am crazy enough for this crazy underwater mermaid adventure. Fingers intertwine, a silent pact made in the depths, fear warring with the thrilling possibility of what's to come. Hands clasped once more, Yoonhae offered an unwavering smile. Perhaps, just maybe, he wasn't so crazy after all. Through the floral swirls, a simple declaration bloomed. I missed you. Even the mermaid felt it. Yoonhae softly calls his name as she clasps his hands tightly, an uncertain warmth sparking between them in the cold bathroom. A tear traces a path down his cheek. Had he somehow ruined their newfound friendship? Did I upset you? He recoiled, the question hanging in the air. No, he wasn't ready to admit what he had just become. It was all too much. A tear slipped down his cheek as he sniffled. Maybe he was crying, but not for the reason she might think. He perched on the stool, a pout forming on his lips. He wouldn't get what she was hiding, would he? How had he gone from a bathroom to an underwater abyss? How did you get here? Hyeseong whispered, utterly bewildered by the turn of events. Yoonhae materializes through the water's shimmering surface. She had to see him again. I missed you, she admits. Hyeseong stuttered, a blush creeping up his neck. He didn't mean to offend her. What did he say now? Bewilderment clouded Hyeseong's thoughts. Had Yoonhae always been this forward, or was their mermaid friendship changing him? Then, a thought struck Hyeseong with the force of a tidal wave. Would their strange bond transcend distance? No matter where I am? A faint yes echoed in his mind, but his eyes remained closed. Perhaps surrendering to the current was easier than facing reality. A sudden realization dawned on Hyeseong, as if a switch had flipped. Maybe he couldn't escape this watery world after all. Two hands reached towards the water, ripples dancing as if welcoming a long-lost friend back to the sea. Hyeseong stared into the mirror. Yoonhae. Was this underwater adventure truly happening, or was he losing his grip on reality? A gentle poke surprised Hyeseong. His skin was starting to look blue. Was this the work of the mermaid or pure madness? Yoonhae's touch was feather-light yet electric. Wherever you are, she whispered, her voice echoing with a promise of strange, uncharted depths. His foot dangled, inches from the cold tile. Was this underwater mermaid adventure really going to be his new normal? Hyeseong sputtered, startled. He thought she'd gone back to her underwater kingdom. Turns out she had only been behind him. Yoonhae points, a watery tear trickling down her cheek. The invitation hangs in the air. Let's dive deeper. He flinched at the sudden call, his eyes darting to the door. Another surprise from his new aquatic companion. He reached out, a hand lingering on her shoulder. Yoonhae should meet him tomorrow. He just can't handle this today, it's too much. Hee-seong fumbled with the handle, a nervous rattle betraying his inner turmoil. He apologizes sheepishly, his mind racing. He really had to pull himself together. The sting radiated across his cheek. Reality crashed in like a rogue wave, leaving him reeling and raw in the silence. The door rattled, a symphony of impatience. She wondered if he was planning to take up permanent residence in the loo. A heavy sigh escaped him, the events of the day replaying behind his eyelids. He was still so confused. Yoon-hae peered into the bathroom, her concern etched on her features as she asked if everything was all right, having heard the yelling. Stunned, Hye-sung waved his hand weakly. His words sounded strained as he uttered, Yeah, I'm all right, though." With a plop, they settled into their respective beds, the exhaustion of the day settling upon them like a heavy blanket. Hye-seong, a tear tracing its path, shut his eyes. He was determined. He would just try and sleep it all away. He scratched his head, confusion clinging to him even in sleep. What wild dreams would bubble up this night? His words dripped with worry. But still, don't have any strange thoughts. Hye-seong could only muster an all right, adrift in the sea of his own mind. An "I understand" hung in the air. It was a shared pain of a loss, a grief he knew all too well. But no moping, okay, punk? The locker room buzzes. A friend suggests a game, but his stomach rumbles a resounding cafeteria. He wants a tasty snack. Kwon Sunbin's name bubbled in the conversation. The trio's path crossed, and perhaps some mischief would be the first thing on their minds. The girls approached with a wave and a friendly greeting, blissfully ignorant of the chaos that awaited them this lunchtime. She smiled softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Today might just be a pretty good day after all. He cocked his head, bewildered. Did the new girls really know him? Reputation, or maybe something more, made his cheeks burn. His eyes widened, his mind a blank slate. No idea he was so popular. A trip to VIPs was the next course of action. His eyebrows shot up as he questioned their priorities. Midterms were looming, but studying was clearly not on the agenda. A wave of icy dread washed over her, silencing the cafeteria chatter as if an unknown secret had been unleashed. He waves off the concern, pointing out the conflicting exams. A friend stutters, but the other insists. No need to fret, number 2 is good enough. His wave was full of energy, while his friends gave a more subdued farewell. Who knew what the VIP trio was scheming now? Yoon Sol's name hung in the air as they nudged a friend. He's nice, he'd go well with her, they chirped with excitement. Her eyes snapped wide as she spoke, her face set in a cold mask. Time was changing, plans were changing. The 29th? It was to be. She wanted to join him, a surge of determination flooding her as she offered her assistance. Leave it to me. The boys gathered, whispering excitedly. They pointed to a student asleep at his desk, daring each other to prank the slumbering victim. Hye-seong's friends crowded around him, an offering extended. Want to eat this? While his other friend called him. What snack would he choose? A smirk twitched at the corner of his lips, a playful reminder that a favor would be repaid in kind, with his uncle's approval. Indignation filled the locker room as words spat out. Abandon the kids? A hand tightened into a furious fist. Tears welled in the girl's eyes as harsh words filled the air, their weight crushing down as they sat beside each other. The man smiled nervously, and Hye-seong was about to start doing exactly as he was told. You can call her your aunt. A determined voice echoes, Open up! But a resolute reply follows, I won't, I'm full. And he seems very, very worried. A sharp smack sent her flying, her face contorting in pain as she shouted. Someone was playing silly buggers. A gentle hand rests on her head, a soft plea echoing, Please don't cry, as her muffled sobs rack his body. Yes? He asks. The child wailed, tears streaming as he clung to his guardian, who looked alarmed. The woman coldly asks if that was his undoing. The slaps echoed, a brutal soundtrack to a torrent of cruel words. The world blurred through tear-filled eyes. He steeled himself, rehearsing the apology that would smooth things over, just a few simple words to calm the storm. He tells himself it's okay, she's only human. His face was stained with ink and his expression was dazed. Maybe apologizing wasn't going to be enough this time. Hye-seong, still reeling, managed to thank Yoon-hae. The mermaid looked up, confused. What had she even done? She only wanted to help. A wave of yearning crashed over him. He'd wished every day for someone to find him, and now he was drowning in the deep. Her smile seemed wistful as she murmured, "Same." "Hmm?" he asked, his expression a silent question, unsure what she was really thinking. Hyeseong clutches the mermaid doll, a wave of confusion washing over him. Yoonhai's words echoed, a melancholic affirmation. "I wouldn't be who I am now." Hyeseong scratched his cheek, lost in thought. How long had he known Yoonhai? Regardless, she certainly had a mermaid way about her. Hyeseong shifts. It wasn't Yoonhai's fault for all this madness, but she's definitely at the heart of their crazy underwater chaos. He sat alone, knee to chest, mulling over the day's chaos and the whispered promise that growing up meant having more time to connect. She wonders if her presence vanished, would he finally find happiness? "Will you be happier?" she asks, a touch laden with complicated hope. Doubt clouds his face. He agreed that if Yoonhai left, he would be happier. But would he really? "I think so." His gaze shifted. It may sound strange, but he had wished Yoonhai would go away, more times than she may ever know. The silence stretched, awkward. This has been one heck of a ride. She must think it's all so strange. She watched him closely. "I see," Yoonhai thought. "He believes that I'm making it all up." The egg sizzled, a sound as ordinary as it was jarring. Another day begins and more mermaid questions will rise. A half-fried delivery was on the way. Gum Heebin watched the tracking app, craving a tasty snack to distract from the mermaid madness. Hyeseong presents the plate of eggs, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his surface as Yoonhai responds in a manner most casual, "Okay." Clattering utensils broke the silence as they both mulled over what to expect from the new changes to their friendship. He figured she was out drinking and he was pleased. He was now able to eat without her presence. He asks because he's glad she isn't back. With a creak, the bed shifted. Hyeseong dreamt of mermaids and mayhem, another restless night haunted by Yoonhai. A loud bang shook Hyeseong awake. He was startled, his eyes fluttering open and the sound echoing in his ears. He sighed. There she goes again, the same cycle spinning. Why did she always drown her stress with booze? Silence descended, and Hyeseong stirred beneath the covers. The relentless cycle of noise finally ceased. "It stopped?" he wondered gratefully. Hyeseong looked around. The house was a mess, and with a sigh wondered how he could have let it get this bad. The room screamed of Yoonhai's chaotic night, a battlefield of empty bottles and scattered thoughts. He sighed. She just left it like this? My God. With a groan, Hyeseong discovered the watery aftermath of Yoonhai's drunken night. She really didn't drain the bath. He stared into the bathtub, watching the water swirl down the drain, a fitting metaphor for his current life spiraling away. He'd scrubbed that tub sparkling clean. Did she use it again? Hyeseong groaned. He couldn't win, could he? The bathtub's rising water sent a jolt of panic through Hyeseong. Another mermaid bath? It was happening again. He rummaged through his shoe collection, a futile attempt to find an escape from the mermaid madness. What kind of adventure awaits today? He counted absently. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her shoes were all here? A sudden thought struck Hyeseong as he wonders where she had gone. Tendrils of mystical energy swirled, beckoning Hyeseong towards the truth of Yoonhai's essence and her mermaid dreams. Reality crashes. The trip to Yoonhai's home is impossible with midterms. He just wants this mermaid fever dream to end already. Yoonhai offered comfort, despite the growing chaos. He'd got her. Hyeseong vowed to solve this mystery and connect the water to something at least. Hyeseong asked if they could both pass to the mermaid world. Yoonhai, still half submerged, simply replies, "Yeah." He whispers Yoonhai's name. A sudden wave of clarity washed over him. He had to protect her. Yoonhai's expression hardened, her grip on reality slipping. Her aunt's been missing. Had he seen her, perhaps? Hyeseong muttered a firm disagreement as her tail splashed. Yoonhai softly spoke. Only he ever called her name, after all. Hyeseong's eyes soften as he processes. Yoonhai only ever leaves when he's here? Yeah, he answers, still puzzled by her reliance. A chill slithered down his neck as Yoonhai gently caresses his cheek. A small, grateful smile escapes his lips. His skin tingled as a strange calmness settled in. Just how deep into this mermaid mystery would he really go? He was ready. Hye-seong's eyebrows furrow, a spark of concern flickering in his eyes. Who could possibly be interrupting their mermaid mystery? A gruff voice breaks the silence. The man wants to know, with urgency lacing his question, "Where's Kim Mi-young?" The stranger loomed, demanding Mi-young's location, his hand gripping the doorframe. Hye-seong braced himself for whatever came next. The man barged into the house, disrupting Hye-seong's thoughts. His tone was laced with desperation as he called out to them. The scraping sent shivers down their spines. Their tormentor gave a grim deadline. Find Aunt Mi-young by the 28th or face the consequences. With a cruel hand on his head, the man mocked. Their family's cycle of prison breaks. He was beyond saving or even caring. A shrill beep cuts through the silence. Hye-seong hesitates at the door, his heart pounding. He wonders what's on the other side. He looked down. Now they had a date, not just a deadline. This was some seriously stressful mermaid detective work. A stern command hangs in the air. Cut those OMR sheets. It's midterm time, the due date is nearing, and Hye-seong really should study. A chorus of whispers fill the room as Hye-seong's friend groans. He's messed up, but can he sneak a peek at an answer? His friend snooped at his paper. Time for a sly look. Answers for sale, mermaid mystery for later, school was for surviving. A tense stalemate. Whispers faded, but no apology would come. Only a silent challenge to the impending exam doom. With the midterm stress momentarily forgotten, they debated transportation. One of the students, with a knowing smirk, said he'd already booked a cab. As they were walking, one of the students wanted to know what their friends were going to do. They agreed to meet later. Uh-oh, someone got their head knocked. An offer of compassion hangs. Maybe this crew will figure out this chaos together after all. The thump echoes through the halls as they all head to class. Hopefully it wasn't one of Hye-seong's friends getting beat up, again. His mind spiraled. Were they actually insane to follow him? They followed me all the way to school, he mused, and he felt a bit flattered. How long will the taxi take? Hye-seong fretted, his eyes darting around anxiously. About 2 minutes, a friend chirped back. Hye-seong felt a tilt in his view. The hulking man loomed, the single word laced with threat. Boss. A sea of students loomed. Someone spots their target, while a friend waves, his eyes sparkling with mischievous intent. Eyes narrowed, a green bag was the tell. The hunt was on, and the midterm stress was fading away. Echoing footsteps, each thump a beat of anticipation, they marched toward an epic lunch, and mermaid madness would have to wait. His heart pounded against his ribs, echoing the thumps closing in. A soft hey, barely audible in the mounting fear. 2 looming figures closed in. He couldn't shake them, not even in school. The unspoken threat hung. Thought you could hide? He tensed, the walls closing in, the question ringing in his ears. He had to be ready to deal with this man. Panic bloomed, the cryptic question reverberating in his head. Who else knew about Mi-young, and why did they want her? He sneered, the air thick with unspoken threats. The walls seemed to vibrate with intensity. Were they running out of time? Hye-seong stared blankly as the world whizzed by. The image of what will happen if they fail the impending deadline played in his head. Their getaway car careened wildly, leaving their friend green. Another classmate wondered if he was getting carsick on their crazy adventure. Hye-seong's face paled as the cab swerved. The world spun, and an order came. You mustn't throw up in the car, kid. Patience wore thin as they waited. Where were the girls? Must be makeup, one sighed, already imagining a mermaid beauty routine. Concern etched on a classmate's face. The whirlwind car trip was not going well for Hye-seong. Sorry, he mumbled, carsick and stressed. Anticipation crackled as the table was being set. Did someone know something? A nervous glance was shot. Waiting game, starting. Words cut deep, masked as concern. Hye-seong insisted he was fine, though his face was paling fast. One classmate sighed, "You're so annoying." A bead of sweat trickled down Hye-seong's temple. Their deadline was closing in and things were really getting intense. Tears welled, a torrent threatening to spill as the deadline loomed ever closer. Could they really solve this in time? A voice booms out, interrupting the midday cafeteria calm. As Sunbin is abruptly asked for his phone, a surprised "okay" slips out. The phone rang, an unwelcome disruption. "I didn't think of it," Hee-seong muttered, realizing he'd been trapped in his selfish thoughts. A hellish realization dawned. Gyum Hee-bin was missing. Where on earth was the girl, and why wasn't she answering his calls? Rage bubbled as Hye-seong clutched his phone. It was a question and an order. "Just listen to what I say." "Why?" Hee-seong sighed, phone pressed to his ear. "Of course you can," he managed, his mind racing with Gyum Hee-bin's disappearance. Hye-seong bowed his head, apologizing for intruding. A woman giggled in response, dismissing the apology with a wave of her hand. The silent plea echoed in his mind. "Please take care of her." The words a weight on his shoulders amidst the chaos. The order came down. "Listen to the adults and cause no problems." He looked down. His friend says she won't look at his texts. Desperate, Hye-seong tapped 112 on his phone, panic clawing at his throat. Something felt terribly wrong. Time was running out. Hee-seong knew he couldn't leave the house empty. The police would be called the moment they arrived, that was for sure. Each step was a heavy decision. Enough was enough. He would do whatever he could and put an end to this mess. Peeking from behind the bathroom door, Hye-seong debated. He was so ready to get out of this mess, even if it seemed impossible. The hallway echoed, empty. Hye-seong clutched the mermaid doll tighter. No one's here, he thought. Where on earth did the hooligans get to? Beep, beep, the phone's persistent rings were a painful reminder. Hye-seong sighed, grabbing the door handle. He muttered, "I need money and other necessities." A chilling welcome hangs in the air. The familiar face, now twisted, greeted him with a sinister tone. "You're back, my dear nephew?" The air crackled with fury. The betrayal stung. "This freaking bastard!" he hissed, sweat beading. "You dare run away?" Trembling, Hye-seong tapped 112. Gyum Hye-bin was in danger, and he felt helpless as he dialed for help. A gruff hand snatched Hye-seong's phone mid-dial. The 112 call cut short. The man's face loomed, a storm cloud brewing. The door slammed as he grabbed Hee-seong. "You should probably prepare for what's coming," the man smirked ominously. With a bang, his world tilted, and a door swung open. Something terrible was about to happen with his maniacal uncle. His uncle gripped his head and he felt a sense of dread. Time was running out and there was nowhere left to run. Hye-seong gasped as a punch collided. His uncle was still in the area and he was still keen to beat his way out. Stunned, Hye-seong questioned if his uncle dared strike him. The looming man watched with a cruel smile. Oh dear, he certainly did. Metal met its match. The door handle suffered from an intense grip and was soon to be bashed against its hinge. Hee-seong gasped, clutching his head. He heard the sound of a struggle and took a breath. What will happen to him now? "Are we a joke to you?" a voice booms from the bathroom. This was certainly not the calm retreat Hye-seong had envisioned. His heart hammered, a frantic drum against his ribs. What do I do? Hee-seong thought, his mind racing. Gyum Hye-bin's fate hung in the balance. The door rattled under a barrage of blows, Hye-seong bracing against its force. It was going to break, wasn't it? Someone needs to chill. The door slammed. He smashed against the tub's edge. This mermaid mystery was more than he signed up for, a big oopsie. The smaller man sheepishly admits his scare attempt failed. Perhaps his uncle's size just ruins the effect when they're together. A goon wondered what to do with him. Hee-seong's dignity crumbled under the threat. A clang echoed, as fate had a twisty turn. A showerhead clinks menacingly against a thug's palm. A twisted offer is extended, though it's less choice, more threat. The thug's eyes narrowed, a menacing question hanging in the air. Was Hye-seong keen for a bath or something much, much worse? His uncle was cold, with a menace so thick it could be cut with a knife. Could it be? He wondered, as dread filled him. His uncle warned of the possibilities as he got his head grabbed. Hye-seong yelped, fearing the showerhead was about to become his enemy. Confusion washed over him as metal clanged against metal. What fresh madness was this, echoing through his uncle's watery domain? Hye-seong flinched as water splashed over him. His uncle loomed, the situation bubbling with a new wave of mermaid madness. The man's muffled cries for help painted a picture of humiliation. A harsh order rung out, his uncle just needs to get up. Hye-seong spluttered, the water invading his lungs. He was trapped. This mermaid bath had taken a turn for the absolutely ridiculous. Hye-seong felt the world tilting sideways. "What the hell? Hey, Seong-tae!" echoed, the words bouncing around, adding to his watery chaos. He bellowed Hye-seong's name, his eyes bulging. This time he was going to make sure the poor kid would feel his wrath. His uncle roared, a terrifying eruption of fury that shook the very walls. Hye-seong could only stare, paralyzed by the impending doom. Hye-seong gasped, air burning in his lungs. This mermaid madness couldn't get worse, could it? His uncle can just leave him alone. Darkness edged his vision. He was drowning, fighting, failing. Was this how it all ended? Sinking into the deep? Bubbles danced as Hye-seong slipped beneath the surface. Had he really drowned? He had to escape this mermaid madness. Panic surged as Hye-seong gasped for air, his legs ached. How had it come to this mermaid mayhem? Where was the bottom? Hye-seong felt his body being submerged underwater by his uncle. He felt hopeless, and he began to sink below the surface. Hye-seong's vision blurred, but he had to stay conscious. Yoon-hae was crying, and he feared their situation had taken a turn for the worse. Defeated, she stared blankly. Tears streaked her face, illuminated by the eerie light. It was a tough life being a mermaid. He sinks further. The world closes in. The only sound his uncle's shouts echo in his ears as he descends to meet his fate. The whispered inquiry hung in the air like a ghost in the room. "Mr. Hye-seong?" Silence stretches. Where was he now? A strange calmness washed over him. The police came and all was taken care of. But something still wasn't adding up. The neighbor reported the ruckus, but the words were meaningless. She confessed the uselessness of counseling, adding salt to Hye-seong's wounds. A chair creaked, the sound jarring. Hye-seong's uncle leaned over, his presence a looming storm about to break. His ears ring as they tell him the fee, 1,001. He wasn't ready. "Should I make your next mermaid appointment?" she asks. His uncle loomed, a dark shadow. His answer was sharp, laced with an unspoken threat. No. He must stay put, no escapes. Heaving breaths escaped Hye-seong. The weight of near death and mermaid mysteries pressed down, crushing any hope of escaping this mess. He exhaled, heavy with exhaustion, and the weight of mermaid madness threatened to drag him down the stairs. He grabbed his head, the sobs a painful wave. He couldn't bear the weight of the mermaid madness any longer. Hye-seong's head was buried in his hands. It had all come to this. A soft resonated in his mind. Tears streamed down Hye-seong's face. What was he supposed to do now? 2 lives, gone because of this mermaid madness. A gasp escaped his lips. "You didn't." It was so quiet, and with steely resolve she simply responded, "I did." Tears welled, clinging like dew to her lashes. Did she really? Her resolve hardens, a fragile strength amidst the storm. The mermaid's logic dripped like the faucet above, cold and clear. Nobody would suspect mermaids because mermaids weren't real. All she had to do was drown and hide. Hye-seong couldn't believe his ears. "How?" he questioned, as a primal fear swelled. "Back off" rang loud and clear. The air vibrates with tension. How could she be so calm with an evil uncle lurking and people going missing? As tears cascade, Yoon-hae whispers that it was because others tormented Hye-seong. Despite everything, she still had a mermaid's heart. A single tear threatens to fall as Hye-seong questions her logic. Was this how she justified her actions now? Yoon-hae cradled his face, murmuring that he was her source of happiness. Nothing could torment her more than his existence. Her admission hung heavy. She treasured him more than life itself and was even crying about it. Yoon-hae's face contorted, her voice raw with emotion. Her tone, her very essence, was a far cry from years past. The room spun, nausea rising. He couldn't think, couldn't breathe. People died, he thought, yet we're still dealing with mermaids? The building loomed, a monument to stress and exhaustion. It was so hard, exams really know how to ruin a day. Hye-seong sighed, muttering that people may think he was a good student. A friend laughed. It's on them if they have to try. Hye-seong dawdled ahead, drowning in thoughts. A friend grabbed his shoulder. "Why are you walking on your own?" "Sorry, I had something on my mind." Hye-seong sighs, defeated. The revelation of Yoon-hae's actions weighs heavy. He can only mutter a quiet agreement. Yeah. Hee-seong paused, mind racing. Something so wrong, so utterly absurd had happened recently that it almost seemed funny? Hee-seong frowned. Carefree days were gone, replaced by the weight of responsibility. I have to study now. Family comes first, he realized. Desperation claws as Hye-seong's hand finds something solid to cling to. He has to survive this mermaid maelstrom. Hye-seong's claim, I'm a human unlike you, hung awkwardly, a ridiculous declaration under the weight of mermaid crimes. Yoon-hae begged as Hye-seong's hands shook. This mermaid mayhem was taking a bit too far. It was time for him to just stop. Yoon-hae's gaze softened as Hee-seong buried his head into her shoulder. She promised herself she wouldn't let him feel a thing. Hye-seong ran his hand across his hair, trying to focus. This was all because of someone else, right? He knelt, defeated. The bathtub loomed, an unforgiving testament to the mermaid madness swallowing his life. What a crazy ride. The moment felt bittersweet as the pair parted, the world heavy. See you soon? Echoed in the air, a promise laced with uncertainty. A sudden halt echoed, the command slicing through the tense atmosphere as forces beyond their control seemed to halt everything. The shoes sat scattered, a silent testament to the chaos that had just unfolded. Hee-seong wasn't going anywhere just yet. Hee-seong felt a familiar dread creeping. Nothing made sense. They were doomed to repeat everything again and again. His uncle barked the command, and he looked at the two looming figures. Go to your room. How rude. Hye-seong's throat tightened, the whispered word catching in the air. Did his uncle know what he was about to do? His uncle paused, a weird statement filling the air. I'll be here for a moment, he declares, his eyes twinkling with mischief. The cops whispered about playing it cool. The kid was clueless, they assumed. Little did they know he'd figured them out. It was a trap. Hye-seong's uncle paused, his gaze unwavering. He stared and uttered the words, Your aunt has passed away, as a storm brewed within Hye-seong. Hye-seong sat, numb. Ah, so it was my first aunt. A hollow correction escaped his lips. Step-aunt. The cops eyed Hee-seong suspiciously. They've been living together for a while now, yet you don't seem surprised? The policeman questioned. Hye-seong's mind spiraled. Had his actions gone too far? This was definitely not what he had planned or intended to do. Crazy! His uncle was practically giddy. Wouldn't Hye-seong be relieved now that his hellish step-aunt was gone, the debts with her? Peering through the blinds, Hee-seong spied the cops. His uncle smirked. Time to see the play out their charade. The papers lay scattered, a stark reminder of the mermaid mess. How did this all start with the missing aunt? The phone rang, a sharp intrusion. Yoon-hae bites her nail, and with an anxious tremble, she picks up. What now? Yoon-hae's voice cracked, demanding, How long do I need to do this? Before coldly ending the call. The game was afoot. Yoon-hae's words were a honeyed trap. Honey, blank, back fast, she crooned, severing the connection with a cruel satisfaction, and the game just started. Furniture crashed and glass shattered. Hee-seong's uncle was letting out his fury. The scene of the crime had been set. A maniacal glint flickered in their eyes, vengeance pulsed through their veins. A chilling vow filled the tense air. Kill everyone. Yoon-hae vowed with murderous intent, a flash of something terrifying flickering behind her eyes. Game on, y'all. The drizzle mirrored the mood. The taxi's taillights blurred as Yoon-hae emerged, ready to play her deadly part of the game. Buchan! His uncle repeated, and a destination hung in the air, heavy with unspoken intent. What would they find there, if anything? To Buchan at this hour, you'd have to pay quite a lot. The cops' words hung, a price for their desperation, or their lives. A voice called out to her in the taxi as they rode. She gripped the knife tighter. Was this a dream or nightmare? Rain hammered the taxi as the cop, incredulous, questioned the Buchan madness. Sirens seemed a saner choice right now. The cop's eyes darted to the mermaid, now sprawled on the hood. This trip to Buchan was about to get a whole lot weirder. Mind-racing, Hye-seong can't believe what his life has become. I'm seeing all the crazy Sonnen life. Regret washed over her. Should she have betrayed Yoon-hae to the cops? The mermaid madness was swallowing them whole. A drizzle started to fall, mirroring the darkness within. The destination loomed, the road ahead slick with uncertainty. Exhaustion settled heavy. The cop rubbed his temples, and he'd really liked a coffee as Buchan's madness awaited. With a clammy hand, the cop reluctantly slammed the gear shift into place. Their mad dash to Buchan had begun. With blade raised high, Yunhai's expression screams. The mermaid's vengeance was only just beginning, and the night held its breath. Mumbles escape Yunhei's mouth as she readies the knife. All would pay for hurting Hyeseong as her eyes shone with rage. With a vroom, the taxi was now roaring into the night. Yunhei's escape marked a step closer to her mermaid vengeance. Engines roar, the car careens through the night, a blue streak against the rain-slicked streets as the trio headed into the unknown. Rain lashed against the walls as a loud clang echoed. Yunhai's fury reverberated through the night, a metallic symphony. Rain lashed against the windows and the tension crackled, thick with the promise of mermaid madness. Vengeance was brewing. Relief washed over Hyeseong. Yu Haijin wasn't to blame. His aunt suffered with drinking and mental health. Okay, a load off. The cop wrapped up. That was it. For now. Call us if any other weird mermaid song goes down, kid. The cops lean, taking notes. A plan was hatching. Someone hesitantly agreed, falling right into their trap. A beep pierces the air as someone opens the door. The seated man asked if everything was really going to be okay, a false sense of hope. A mighty yawn escaped him as they drove away. What a day this had already been. More mermaid madness awaited. His uncle announced they were done. Needing to get back to Buchan, he mused that leaving now meant arriving by 6 p.m. His uncle confronted Hyeseong. Was he truly scared of someone being a murderer? The situation was getting way too intense. Accusations hung heavy, the silence broken by a bitter question. You don't care about their lives, do you? Why can he study? His mind races with dark possibilities. Could Yunhei really have left a body behind? Close, he says, as he grips the item tighter. Hyeseong stared at the book, trying to recall everything. He needed the information to save them from mermaid mayhem. The bathroom was a sterile stage, a haunting reminder. Here, his mermaid madness had climaxed. The scent of disaster lingered. Hyeseong sighed. It was getting too much. The folder and other belongings awaited their moment of doom as he sat in distress. Yunhai peeked from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Grandma Malsuk's called, but can she truly trust the news? Yunhai answered, her voice strained. She gave a formal greeting. Hello, Grandma, and braced for whatever came next. Little Haibin beams, innocence radiating from her as his uncle loomed. A twisted statement echoed. Haibin is a big girl now. Hyeseong felt the weight of the world and thumped with each syllable that dripped from his end of the line. His blood ran cold, a bead of sweat trickling, a call to action. Something bad must be brewing. His heart sank with each syllable from the other end of the line. It all must be brewing now. He should act fast. The photo mocked him with its simplicity. Family, love, joy. It was all a sham now, twisted beyond recognition by mermaid madness. A nostalgic smile flickered. The weight of the book fell away. Memories fluttered of family and younger days. The old photo showed simpler times, a time before twisted family secrets and murderous mermaids wreaked absolute chaos. He peered into the distance, brows furrowed. What fresh hell awaited in Buchan? This mermaid mess was too much. Images blur, a photo album of the past. How's Mom? A distant voice asks, snapping him back to the mermaid-infested present. The cold air hung heavy as he was asked for a swab. Yes, he replied, too late as the mermaid's test was clearly going bad. He ransacked the room, frantically searching as the possibilities swirled in his head. What if it was all for naught, a stepfather? The thought stung as Hyeseong stared at the matches. Was this another twist in their mermaid-ridden saga? The response hung in the air. Oh? Hyeseong mused, trying to process the implications of the call. Hyeseong's uncle stands above the sleeping body of the little child. What new depravity had he sunk to amidst mermaid mayhem? Panic laced the air. Where did Mom go? He was met with confusion as an answer echoed. Mom, who? What in the world was happening? Confusion and a terrible dread washed over Hyeseong. The words echoed. We don't have a mother. What did that all even mean? Hyeseong was confused. I'm not talking about Dad. Instead, he wanted to know, why did he not have a mother? There's no time. She demands they hurry. Someone needs rescuing from this ongoing saga of mermaid madness. The sea air was crisp as Hyeseong held the girl's hand, the scene deceptively peaceful despite their mermaid madness. Hyeseong beams, finally seeing a boat after all the mermaid madness, a sliver of normalcy amidst chaos. She went out to get food for us, a cheerful shout erupted. Hope returned despite everything in the midst of mermaid madness. Hyeseong points out that they do have a mom. The girl questions. Even if she searches everywhere, she would not find her. The vessel starts. Engines roared to life, slicing through the waves, desperate for answers amidst the mermaid madness. Hyeseong could feel it. His head was pounding. What was real and what was simply a fabrication? Really? He whispered, a lone tear. The smack echoed, silencing any arguments. Shut up, Gumheben, return by yourself. They were trapped with someone's twisted vengeance. The vial was labeled, but no amount of knowledge could solve this mermaid mayhem. The test was coming, and he just wanted to be alone. Adrenaline surged, and Hyeseong sprinted across the boat. He just had to act fast to stop this mermaid madness. A desperate cry cuts through the air, the words ricochet, echoing across the expanse as they searched the waves for her whereabouts. He marches toward a new reality amidst mermaid mayhem. Was there no end to the twisted path ahead for Hyeseong? A chilling silence descends, and Gumheben stands alone, her isolation a stark reminder of the mermaid mayhem. Hope bloomed, a fragile flower amidst the thorns. That's Mom's voice, the young girl cried, clinging to hope for her salvation. A creak echoed as Hyeseong landed on the pipe. He had to find her, the sound a rude reminder of urgency. His name echoes as someone called to Hyeseong, but he's too focused on the waves to react. Someone needed to get him now. The young girl whispers, Mom, her voice cracking. She was nowhere to be seen, lost in the salty spray of mermaid chaos. Seagulls flew overhead as the engines roared, a beacon of life amidst the sea of mermaid mayhem that threatened to consume them. Hyeseong's eyes scanned the horizon, the boat machinery surrounding him. Where had she gone? The mermaid mayhem would never end. Winged beings loom, a chorus of voices echoing, they beckoned, teasing with the promise of answers or the embrace of finality. Hyeseong glanced at the winged beings, their allure irresistible. Could salvation lie in their ethereal embrace amidst mermaid chaos? Fear flickered as Hyeseong stares into the endless waves. The mermaid madness was starting to claim even his sanity. Claws pierced. She knew her fins couldn't swim. Her wing, broken and soaked, provided hope to escape the mermaid maelstrom. As the winged beings descended, pecking and probing, his sanity slipped further into the abyssal depths of mermaid chaos. He sinks, and they feast. Hyeseong crouched, hands pressed against cold glass. Was she gone? He felt the isolation close as the mermaid mayhem continued. Tears welled. The realization crashed over Hyeseong, a tidal wave of grief threatening to drown him in mermaid madness. Darkness closed in as he tumbled into nothing. This mermaid madness swallowed him whole with no end in sight. Hyeseong lay awake, drenched in sweat as Yoon-hae slept soundly beside him. Could he ever escape this mermaid madness? Hyeseong pulled the covers tight. Even in sleep, the mermaid madness refused to release its grip on his soul. Everything seemed to slide away. Hyeseong was trapped, and what he felt was the dread of endless mermaid madness. A rattle echoes, snapping Hyeseong from his thoughts. He peers through the door crack, dread mixing with mermaid mayhem. Through the crack, Hyeseong peered at his uncle's strange suit. He was up to no good, and Hyeseong's gut churned with dread. An unwelcome visit, a step-aunt's portrait, the truth reeked of morbid humor or a sick cosmic joke of mermaid proportions. With dread clinging to him like the chill of the room, Hyeseong's back was a question mark. What horror now awaited? The portrait loomed, draped with black, a stark reminder of loss as the scent of lilies failed to mask the lingering stench. Grief hung thick like the scent of lilies. The painting was there, amidst the mermaid madness, but nothing could take it away. A ritual unfolded, but a plea escaped. Mom, I'm sorry. The scent of incense swirled. The quest for grades had a heavy price. Defeated, Hyeseong collapses. Mermaid madness, family secrets, and sinister step-uncles were too much. His energy waned. The sky stretched, a canvas of uncertainty. The funeral home sign hung heavy, a symbol of the dread that permeated the air. Tears flowed freely as Hyeseong buried his face into his arms. The aching loss of his mom overwhelmed him during this mermaid madness. The photo of his step-aunt seemed to mock the funeral, her serene smile an eerie contrast to the surrounding mermaid mayhem. The weight of everything crashes down on Hyeseong, an avalanche of despair and uncertainty. He's not ready for the real world. Despair washed over Hyeseong as tears streamed down his face. The weight of the world was far too much to bear. Hand in hand, they walked along the shore. The kid's delight, but not even the beach could erase his mermaid misery. Rain plipped against the window, a relentless rhythm mirroring the relentless mermaid madness consuming Hyeseong's life, one drop at a time. A tap resonates. A small cup threatens the mermaid mayhem on the table. It was so close to ending. With a mouthful of food, Uncle asked how Haesung's friends arrived. They had taken the KTX, then hopped on a bus. Uncle mused that Hyeseong's friends came a long way. The travel details probably meant the whole gang was in cahoots. Hyeseong's uncle smirked, toothpick dancing between his lips. Skipping school for this, huh? This whole mess was getting hilarious. Eyes widened behind thick glasses, questions swirling. His friend casually stated they had come because Haesung's our best friend, of course. A slow wow escaped as the man surveyed the group. He twirled the toothpick in his mouth, clearly enjoying the unfolding mermaid mayhem. His uncle's words dripped with venom, twisting the knife deeper. Their friendship far exceeded that of a blood tie to him. Clutching his shirt, Hyeseong trembled. The weight of his uncle's venomous words crashed in. The group was truly screwed. A startle echoed as Hyeseong flinched. What new mind game was his uncle trying to pull now amidst the mermaid madness? The toothpick dropped as his uncle eyed Hyeseong. "Do you think they came because they like you?" he sneered. His eyes narrowed. Hyeseong flailed, protesting that it wasn't like that, but his friend questioned why he spouted such nonsense if it wasn't true. The question hung heavy. "When will your train arrive?" a friend stated 5:50. Hyeseong dreaded Bucheon with all its mermaid madness. A somber blue armband marked his sorrowful journey. The weight of death mingled with the urgency of Bucheon. His friend was curious if his uncle knew something. "By the way, does your uncle—" he started but trailed off, wary. Whispers carried a familiar sting as a friend asked if his uncle was always like that. It was a drinking problem. Too late now. A nudge shakes him from his thoughts. A sheepish, "Huh? I'm sorry?" escapes him as the mermaid madness starts to close in. Hyeseong's uncle bid farewell, watching them leave. One friend noted, "We better get going," as this mermaid mess continued. Hyeseong's brow furrowed. Bucheon loomed closer and the train rumbled on, hurtling them towards the heart of mermaid madness. Hyeseong tensed, guilt swirling. His friend's question felt pointed, dredging up the mermaid madness, and his anxiety began to rise. A voice whispers a familiar name, jolting Hyeseong from his thoughts. The mermaid madness was starting to swallow him whole. Despite the shock, Hyeseong told himself to remain calm. No words would fix this mermaid mayhem, so he had to be tough. Hyeseong's uncle loomed, a grim reminder. "If you break down now, your sister won't have anyone to depend on," he says. Hyeseong closes his eyes, exhaustion washing over him. Bucheon awaited with whatever fresh hell its mermaid madness might bring. Tears streamed down his face. It was all too much, an overwhelming "ah!" escaping as the mermaid mayhem reached its peak. As the elevator doors closed, friends embraced Hyeseong, and his friends choked back sobs. He could cry as much as he wanted. Hyeben sat alone, and she glanced at an ominous sign on the easel. The mermaid madness was starting to feel inescapable. The floor seemed to swallow him whole. The mermaid mayhem continued its relentless pursuit of Hyeseong's fragile spirit. Yoonhye stood before the altar, guilt consuming her. This mermaid madness demanded a heavy price, far too heavy for all. She faced the altar alone as Hyeseong's uncle peered from the doorway. This was his show, and he wouldn't miss a single thing. Hyeseong lay still. The elevator's hum faded as the doors opened, revealing his sinister uncle who was ready to take over. Hyeseong embraced the young girl, her small frame trembling. "Huh?" he murmured, bewildered by his uncle's words. there was always someone. Heben snuggled against him, finally finding solace, and he was still caught off guard. The twisted statement echoed. Uncle teased, a hand resting heavily on Hexiong's shoulder. The dialect returned, didn't it? Hexiong mumbled in response, mortified. Hyeben nestled close as Uncle reminisced about dialects, his words a strange comfort. Do you even remember our Seoul accent? He questioned. Perched above it all, Uncle chuckled. Everything was set, and the game was about to begin amidst the mermaid mayhem. Hyeben snuggled, finding a rare moment of peace. Hexiong's face was a mask of forced calm amid the mermaid madness brewing. Hyeben, he starts, his voice thick. Until this funeral's end, he wouldn't be sad. Mom would frown if they wallowed. Hyeben gazed at her mom's portrait, an earnest wish blossoming. She yearned to grow up fast, to share her parents' duties. Flowers framed the memorial space. The family has gathered, and Hyben's face was filled with a solemn promise as the mermaid mayhem continued. The unspoken plea trembled in his voice. He searched her face, desperation bubbling, but no one could be on his side now. Hyeben beamed, her small hand resting on his shoulder. As long as you don't do anything bad, I'll always be on your side. Chuckling, Uncle goaded her to share an example of when he'd been bad, the absurdity lost on him amidst mermaid madness. He was ready. The word hung in the air like a shroud. Murder? An accusation, a question, and maybe now an awful revelation. They sat on the floor, a shared island in the sea of sorrow. This was too much for the little one to take. He wasn't sure either. Hope flickered in Hexiong as Hyeben professed eternal loyalty. But what price would that support demand amidst the mermaid madness? Rain hammered the windows of the funeral hall, the aftermath of a wake, a bleak tableau of sorrow and shattered beer bottles. The school loomed, a cruel irony. Before we begin class, he thought, the question hung in the air, an intrusion from reality. The teacher tapped his pointer with dry humor. Their class was doomed from the start, academically speaking anyway. What about the mermaids? Hexiong's uncle narrowed his eyes. Don't you feel anything after seeing Haesung? He pressed, the air thick with accusation. Whispers rippled. Why was Haesung suddenly being handled well? Rumors spread like wildfire amidst the ongoing mermaid chaos. Unease hung in the air. Haesung's friend surveyed the room, brow furrowed as the mermaid mayhem crept ever closer. With a resounding zip, he closed a chapter. A sense of dread amidst the relentless mermaid madness weighed heavy in school. Hexiong gripped his bag, the silence loud, the lingering unease of it all now weighing heavy within the school halls. A friend questioned his rage. Another admitted wanting to kill Kim Mayong-gi, their homeroom teacher, for revealing shameful family secrets. He was furious. The friends exploded with righteous fury. Fire the teacher. Hexiong sighed. It's fine, really. But their faces betrayed disbelief. Gum Hyeben's name lingered in the air as they planned to find out what this has to do with Hexiong's uncle's sick mermaid game. Someone wondered aloud at who was standing by the gate. Another voice erupted. It was her Appa. Wow, so handsome. Bemused, Haesung was quizzed, the school day barely over, and these friends acted like he'd been gone a decade amidst mermaid madness. His friend gushed over his resemblance to a K-pop star. Flustered, Haesung mumbled thanks, completely clueless in the mermaid mayhem. A chorus erupted, vying for a moment with Haesung. The K-pop star resemblance had sparked a frenzy of fanboydom. Friends bombarded Hexiong, questioning his sister's Jeju trip. A seed of doubt was planted as a kid claimed she never even went. What? Haesung heard a familiar cheer for the first time. Jeju Island? He wondered. Something wasn't adding up about his sister's whereabouts. She noticed him fleeing and nervously stated, "See, he's running away!" Haesung trembled. The lies were mounting amidst mermaid madness. His friend cried she caught him. Hexiong was being held back from the airport. "Let go!" he demanded in this mermaid madness. A kid confidently shouted Haesung would be dead meat since she had her Appa with her. Mom said, was her defense, innocence personified. Haesung tensed, knowing the K-pop comments would not deter the inevitable tidal wave of mermaid mayhem. Haesung stood speechless, frozen with the dreadful guilt. A friend stammered out. He was very, very sorry for everything that was happening. With a gentle pat came an affirmation that even with all the mermaid mayhem, everything would somehow turn out all right. Despite his words, Hyeseong couldn't shake the feeling of being utterly and irrevocably alone amidst this mermaid madness. It's okay. Confusion washed over Hyeseong as it was stated that they went to Jeju Island. Should he even tell his mother too? Okay? Hyeseong accepts the hand on his head, a silent okay barely audible. But could the lie really be washed away so easily? One friend gushed over his resemblance to a K-pop star, another was so cool while the subject was lost in mermaid mayhem. A question hung as they approached CTV. Someone offered a cheery explanation to celebrate Children's Day with a movie amidst mermaid madness. Someone spoke of a show, famous apparently. The screen glowed with a cartoon of a girl and her cartoon dog. His friend asked if he wanted to watch the movie, but her voice was full of doubt. Wasn't it a bit childish? Her birthday blared from the screen. Charlotte, happy birthday, it read, yet another unwelcome distraction in mermaid mayhem. Charlotte beamed, declaring this her best birthday ever. Hyeseong only hoped it wasn't her last amidst mermaid madness. Charlotte's heart swelled as her family embraced, unaware of her birthday broadcast. Maybe she can escape mermaid madness? A sniffle escaped as Hyeseong sat still. Doubt lingered. The whirlwind of mermaid madness was making him unwell. Wiping his eyes, Haesung was a mess. The friend shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to navigate this tsunami of mermaid madness. His friend reached over, a comforting hand. The gesture was sweet, but it cut him even deeper in mermaid mayhem. Blue crystals crackled and spat in the pan, a bizarre concoction bubbling away amidst the ongoing mermaid madness. A tentative yes escaped, a hesitant endorsement. The bubbling potion was still a mystery and its results not yet certain. The chef encourages them to dig in, to feast on this bizarre concoction as the mermaid madness takes hold. Her pout deepened, a wave of regret washing over her. She really should have thought about her choices in the movie. He stared blankly, consumed. Knowing why Charlotte cried was now gnawing, the secret stewing into mermaid-sized proportions. Hyeseong wondered if she remembered Mole Island. Haebin only remembered vague snippets of him and their mom. Would they ever return? Gum brushed it off, a casual boast. Little Haebin had simply called him father, such adorable gibberish, really. The absurdity grew. Lost in thought, she wondered aloud if birthday parties were part of her forgotten childhood amidst mermaid madness. Birthday parties? Of course, she declared with a wistful smile. Those parties were even bigger and better than the movie. A resigned sigh filled the sterilized air. There were mermaid matters, but they had to get on living as they do now. A gavel slams. The echo resonates through the space. Why this? Was the trial finally over, or was the mermaid madness truly closing in? A seed of guilt was planted. Mom went to sea and he was just playing alone every day? The words rang with bitter truth. She confesses, a sheepish smile on her face. Now, amongst friends, the loneliness has mostly faded and disappeared. Small hands clasped, they stood side by side. I also don't have a father, she confessed, a shared burden amidst mermaid mayhem. Dread coalesced as his hair drifted. The mermaid madness had begun, with a sickly yellow-green tail the cause of it all. The sea shimmered as she touched the ocean floor. Could this shell hold an answer? A way out of the mermaid madness? He rests beside her, sun glinting off his goggles. For a brief moment, the mermaid madness is forgotten. Only light remains. Hyeseong felt the weight of her head rest against him. The mermaid madness was relentless and solace was fleeting. Doubt flickered in Hyeseong's eyes. What secrets were buried beneath the surface of this never-ending mermaid madness? Defeated, Hyeseong slumped, shoulders heavy. The mermaid madness pressed down, crushing him beneath its weight. Rain soaked them as they stepped outside, Hyeseong suggesting a walk. Anything was better than staying. She just nodded, eager to leave. A surge of desperate hope pulsed through Hyeseong. The green light beckoned like a siren song from the mermaid mayhem. Rain lashed as the girl urged them to cross now. Hyeseong argued they were already late anyway. A few minutes wouldn't matter amidst mermaid madness. Defiance flared as Haebin darted into the rainy street. Hyeseong yelled a warning. The mermaid madness could not keep her trapped. His breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in his throat. Did she not understand what awaited her in this mermaid madness? A desperate cry of "Heben!" pierced the air as she recklessly dashed into traffic, a world of hurt about to descend. Time slowed. Every nerve screamed as Hyebin flew into the street, and Hyeseong's heart was trapped within this mermaid madness. Hyebin's eyes widened with horror as she runs out. The rain matched her tears as she charged headfirst into mermaid madness. A collective gasp echoes as Hyebin dashes into the rain. Had she been hit? Desperate cries to call for help erupt. Hyeseong sprints towards his sister. Horrified witnesses watch, umbrellas forgotten as Hyebin's mermaid madness fate hangs in the balance. Hyeseong's eyes dart wide with horror. The mermaid madness had become reality, a twisted echo of what was coming. The rain was relentless, mirroring the storm inside. Did she realize the danger she had just ran into for real? A desperate grip tightened on his wrist, the blue tinge of the mermaid mayhem clinging even in this moment of despair. A strangled ugh barely escaped her lips as wheels screeched, a metal beast looming. A muffled cry pierced the rain. Hyeseong stood frozen. The uncle murmurs, asking if Hyebin is okay as she lies submerged. The mermaid mayhem had finally dragged her to a new depth. Hyebin, sopping, trembled and spoke. She knew she wasn't supposed to run. Hyeseong was frantic. Could he really fix this mermaid madness? Hyeseong reassured her they're only scratches, but a tear escaped. A desperate hug, a fleeting shelter from this mermaid madness. He spoke with a surprising calm. You're mistaken. Hyebin, still shaken, clung to her pillow. The mermaid madness was far from over. Hyeseong shuddered, recalling the unsettling touch. It felt like a ghost. Hyebin didn't care. Only the mermaid mattered. Her eyes widen as the accusation hangs heavy in the air. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was not. Why this? Oh no. As Hyebin drifts into sleep, an unseen voice murmurs, "Sweet dreams, little miss. The mermaid madness will claim another victim." Hyebin lay awake. She hoped that if there was a ghost, it was her parents. The mermaid madness had taken over her life. Don't you? He stood, lost in thought, words failing him as this never-ending mermaid madness engulfed him completely. The pen taps against the paper, an eerie echo in the silence as a chillingly simple confirmation hangs in the air. Yeah, the pen scratched across the paper, a stark contrast to Hyebin's quiet sleep. Was he really writing his future or sealing it? The sink fills with a gush. Hyeseong stares into the drain, watching his reflection warp with the swirling water, and he sinks more into mermaid madness. The faucet squeaked as Hyeseong tried to get a grip. Drip, drip it went. He was overwhelmed. This mermaid madness was now endless. Murmurs ripple through the room, a tidal wave of uncertainty washing over everyone as they read the career counseling message. It's your turn, a friend whispered. Hyeseong confessed he messed up. I told you to answer carefully, the friend chuckled, adding to the mermaid madness. Hyeseong heard his name called and a chill ran down his spine. This was it, another step deeper into mermaid madness. Searching for the answer, Hyeseong mumbled about what he was looking for. Somewhere, something would reveal mermaid madness. A form mocks him, words searing like a brand. Wants to be rich was all he sought. Mermaid madness be damned. A nervous cough barely masks the truth. Haesung bit his lip. He knew he'd messed up, and the mermaid madness now threatened to drown them all. Hyeseong brooded, resting his chin on his hand. The weight of the world threatened to drag him under mermaid mayhem. Hyeseong's name was circled, alongside a chilling note. Orphan needs special. The mermaid madness had taken a cruel turn. A thud echoes as the file lands. Hyeseong shrinks under its weight, another brick in the wall of mermaid madness closing in. A deliberate cough hangs in the air, disrupting the uncomfortable silence. Hyeseong tenses, bracing for whatever comes next, mermaid madness impending. The room loomed cold and sterile. It was an office, a blank slate, an empty space. What madness awaited him there? A bright invitation hung in the air. Karaoke? Perhaps a brief respite from the ever-encroaching mermaid madness. They turned as one. The girls, unaware of the dark secrets clinging to their friend, radiated an almost unreal calm. His friends agreed to karaoke, and suddenly karaoke seemed like a shield against the mermaid madness to come. They'd get through this. The school hallway stretched long. Karaoke seemed the only option as they made their way to the impending mermaid doom. Hae-seong's ears perked. What was he supposed to do now in this never-ending mermaid mayhem? He stared blankly into nothing. A dismissive wave pushed her towards Hae-seong. He scoffed, a playful jab, questioning if she suddenly had a crush. She grabbed him, demanding if his brain needed fixing, his wild thoughts out of control. "Let go of my collar," he begged. She cooed, clearly thinking of the K-pop star resemblance, as Hae-seong's friend pondered if he noticed her. He probably did. "Karaoke?" Hae-seong wondered. The suggestion hung in the air, a possible reprieve from impending mermaid madness doom. Despite the impending karaoke trip, one friend reassures the group that it can be fun without all the singing, a fun night out regardless. Eager grins sparkled, plans firming for a karaoke escapade, the only escape from this ongoing, all-consuming mermaid madness. The friend teased, suspecting the truth behind the outfit excuse as they all head toward karaoke. Something more was coming. The friends gathered closer, sharing a silent moment, but with a shared glance they knew the karaoke might not be the best idea now. Arms linked, friends walk together. The karaoke, a bright beacon, pulls them from the mermaid madness. Maybe it was worth it. The friend squealed, giddy with excitement. Was Hae-seong checking her out amidst this impending mermaid madness? Her lip quivered, hand touching her face. Guys. She blushed, clearly overwhelmed by the karaoke love. Mermaid madness, maybe? Excitement bubbled as Hae-seong's friend confessed the protagonist was making a move. How could anyone resist with mermaid madness creeping closer? He sighed. What did he do to garner so much attention? How was he going to escape this karaoke mermaid madness? Confusion lingered. Who was behind all this mermaid madness? A small voice piped up. My dad. Oh, he was not ready for this. Hae-seong stammers, eyes wide with disbelief. Why the hell would I run? He retorts. The mermaid madness had taken hold. Friends crowded, teasingly demanding if he needed a repeat, while another mockingly suggested he stop talking complete nonsense. Karaoke, here they come. A smack echoed, his face twisted, mortified. How could she have actually kissed him? Karaoke would be interesting amidst mermaid madness. A beat of silence hung heavy as a friend wondered what was wrong. The karaoke mermaid madness was about to begin. Hae-seong's mind reeled as he replayed the kiss. An unspoken question lingered. What did it all mean amidst this mermaid madness? Hae-seong threw his arms wide, belting, Karaoke, wee! Some friends looked amused, and one clearly thinks he's lost it in mermaid mayhem. Hey, wait for us! His friends shouted, their voices echoing. Yet Hae-seong remained frozen amidst the karaoke madness. A sigh escapes, barely audible. The weight of the karaoke, the kiss, the mermaids, threatened to drag him down deep. A chorus of voices confirmed their destination. Shu karaoke! The best place for good services to escape the mermaid madness, apparently. With each step the karaoke loomed, as did his doom. He didn't know it was just a pit stop for mermaid madness. Apologies spill. A nervous hand rests on his shoulder. Confusion was bubbling, as the karaoke trip could either be the best or the worst amidst mermaid madness. Hae-seong tried to shrug off the question about parents, but why did the question linger on, for no reason? Why this mermaid madness now? He was lying through his teeth, a desperate attempt to shield himself. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. Hae-seong recoiled, a visible huh hanging above him. Why was the karaoke owner dressed like that amidst the mermaid madness? Uncle's unsettling gaze cuts through him, a predator assessing prey. He prepared to dive into Shu karaoke, a place of mermaid madness. Hae-seong belted out the lyrics, time after time, his voice echoing with a forced enthusiasm to distract from the building mermaid mayhem. Hae-seong's heart yearned to express itself with the lyrics, but all that escaped was a strangled, my heart, like the sky, you know. Oh no, such a score! His friends teased, mocking his terrible singing. Another friend defended the score's accuracy. A friend wondered if a human was inside. Giddy excitement danced in their eyes as the girls affirmed karaoke, their brief escape from the spiraling mermaid madness. A desperate plea cut through the off-key karaoke chaos. Something had happened. Concern rippled. What fresh mermaid madness had emerged now? She threw her hands up in disbelief. 9 p.m.? That was medieval. One friend gasped. When did she even get the chance to escape karaoke mermaid madness? Excitement bubbled inside her. Now's my chance, she thought, asking nonchalantly how long he could hang. Karaoke, maybe, could break the mermaid madness. She declared she wouldn't stay long, despite her chance to escape the dreaded karaoke mermaid madness for good. Confusion clouded her eyes. Why? She asked, her voice laced with genuine bewilderment at this karaoke mermaid madness. Hye-seong declared he couldn't stay out too long. His little sister needed him. Her brow furrowed as she asked, doubtful of the excuse. He blurted, a warning tinged with panic. Hey, don't bring up his parents! The karaoke microphone sat, a stark contrast to the mounting mermaid madness. Hye-seong was caught off guard. His friend seemed distracted. Was she mistaking uncle for his manager amidst karaoke mermaid madness? Hye-seong waved dismissively, a warning laced in his tone. Family was a minefield best left untouched during the mermaid madness. A hush fell over the group. The silence screamed louder than the karaoke, each mind lost in its own karaoke mermaid mayhem. Damn it, he thought. Karaoke was boring. Whose turn is it? Lee Sol-bi, he announced, desperation laced with forced excitement. The room erupted as Sol-bi's jam blasted through the speakers. I'm So Pretty filled the air, a brief reprieve from mermaid madness. She rolled her eyes. Even though that bastard ruined the mood. At least Sol-bi's jam, I'm So Pretty, makes karaoke less mermaid mad. Sol-bi bounces, microphone in hand, ready to unleash her killer vocals. My singing should cheer up the atmosphere. 5, 6, 7, 8. She winked, clutching the microphone as she playfully says she has to leave first. Why so smiley now? With a swish of her skirt, she was already moving on. The karaoke, an oblivion, was only a stop in the mermaid madness plan. The air crackled with unease. She clutches the microphone, her eyes flickering as guilt weighed heavy after bailing from karaoke. A concerned shout pierced the air. They couldn't know about Kwon Sunbin. A pall of mystery overhung their escape from karaoke mermaid madness. Her voice sliced through the karaoke chaos. I'm mad at you, she snapped. Huh? Hye-seong sputtered, completely blindsided. Hee-seong bristled, eyes narrowed. Was he not allowed to talk about his family? Always someone else to poke their noses in? Mermaid madness. She stumbled. Was she trying to protect him from grief in this karaoke mermaid madness? Was she avoiding his parents? Am I that weird? What were they even talking about? Hee-seong scoffed, defensive. Even his family with their mermaid secrets had problems, okay? So? She was a nutjob. Hye-seong insists he's not ashamed, even though he's basically a parental figure. A friend starts to ask, but catches herself, then stops mid-sentence. He clenched his jaw, a vein throbbing. A friend's words stung. He was no better than their teacher? How could this be? Someone let out a brutal truth bomb, stating he currently looked like a piece of something they couldn't repeat now. Mermaid madness? Tension crackled. She snapped. She'd been worried. Why did he have to be such an absolute jerk about it all? She couldn't win in mermaid madness. Sol-bi slapped her forehead, mortified. The mermaid madness kiss had backfired spectacularly, leaving her feeling like a total idiot. Words hung in the air like a storm. Someone knew too much about Hee-seong. Accusations, a bitch move, ignited a fire in mermaid madness. Jae-jong, only you and I know about Hee-seong's... The words hung, a promise and a threat amidst mermaid madness. He muttered, scratching his head. Friends understood why he got mad at a teacher, right? The ice cream was doing nothing to solve mermaid madness. An awkward silence hung between them. I should probably apologize, one friend said, as the other crossed a line today, obviously. The city lights mocked Hye-seong's mounting panic. Why the hell did he run? A question without karaoke mermaid answer. A muttered response hung close. The bathroom's stark tile seemed to mock him. What was he even doing? A wave of fatigue washed over him amidst the mermaid madness. Hye-seong stared blankly, lost in thought as the mermaid madness swirled, his mind trapped in this chaotic storm. He sat still, the shimmering powder a disturbing reminder. Karaoke could not erase the mermaid madness that was still building. With newfound courage, she confessed her past errors, apologizing for her assumptions, admitting her fears got the better of her. She offered her gratitude for saving her brother. So much was offered for what she had already caused in Karaoke mermaid madness. Gratitude softens her features, shimmering like dew, as a tear traces a path down her cheek. He rescued her from mermaid doom. She confessed she too lacked a father. She hadn't had parents in a long time, her face sunken in a tidal wave of mermaid madness. Sol B confessed. She yearned to be the friend he could always count on. Hyeseong looked back, contemplating these words in mermaid madness. Guilt weighed heavy, as Hyeseong confessed how his mother's passing made him feel like an outsider, swallowed by mermaid madness. Sol B at the edge of the tub rested her head. The weight of loneliness was evident. Did you also feel this way? She insisted her friends weren't those kinds of people. He wondered aloud what kind they actually were, as the mermaid madness continued to swirl. Hyeseong struggled to speak. He was trying to deny a truth, yet the words hung heavy, just as the other party said in mermaid madness. A wave of guilt crashed over Hyeseong. He wonders if he was among those who abandoned her to mermaid doom. With a secretive smile, the hand beckoned. She was eager to reveal what she had discovered amidst the mermaid madness. Her voice echoed, yet soft with warning. Look into the water and go inside. Could this be the next step in the mermaid madness? He leaned over the tub, bracing, but it was too late. The water was calling, a portal to the depths of mermaid madness. Hyeseong hesitated, the water beckoning. He couldn't shake the feeling this was a trap, another plunge into mermaid madness. He fell in, spiraling down. Tiny fish danced in the water. Was this the portal she spoke of? The gateway to endless mermaid madness? Hyeseong thrashed, gasping for air. He surfaced, spitting water as he emerged from the tub, screaming and dreading mermaid madness. Hyeseong surfaced, spluttering. How can the sea? He began to ask, now questioning everything about this mermaid madness. Eyes wide, Hyeseong stared, asking if this was what happened to her. Was she the same now amidst mermaid madness? Dread washed over him as he stammered. Could she really be the same person after her dunk? No way! He refused to believe this mermaid madness. Her face softened, a wistful smile playing on her lips. Mula Island? Yes. It was Mula Island Sea, her voice almost sing-song. She called to him, extending a hand, for just a moment before everything changed again in this sea of mermaid madness. Sol B's hand grasped his firmly, her eyes hopeful. Hyeseong was pulled back into the mermaid realm, whether he wanted it or not. Everything shifted, the world shimmering gold. It's just like back then. The mermaid's words hung, a gateway to the past. As they clasp hands, the world fades. She whispered those words, "This and me will never change," drowning out mermaid madness. Sol B grasped his hand. A shock ran through them both, a connection that was strong despite the building mermaid madness. Hyeseong stared at the surface, now understanding. She'd transformed just like that, amidst the never-ending mermaid madness. A desperate plea echoes, "Don't go, Yoonhae!" But it's too late. The world has shifted, and it's time for some mermaid madness again. A strangled cough barely escaped, the terror was bubbling. Was this the end of karaoke? Or something worse, some mermaid madness? Panic seized him, the mermaid's grip tightening. She screamed a name. He was a puppet, pulled by mermaid madness strings. "Why?" he demanded. Panic welled up in Hyeseong. He shouted, eyes wide with fear, as the mermaid madness threatened to consume him completely. Hyeseong gasped, clutching desperate hands. This had to be a joke, right? He was so freaked out. Karaoke and mermaid madness was now real. Tears cascaded down. She was now at a breaking point and asked if he would just give it up. This mermaid madness had to end. His mind scrambled, eyes wide with a cold sweat. What on earth was happening now? He just whispered, "Huh?" in mermaid madness. Her touch was soft, a gentle kiss promising peace. Was this a comfort or another twist in this never-ending mermaid madness? Submerged in water, Sylvie rests her head. Despair washed over her as if she was already mermaid dooming, fully drowned. Sol B's touch, a ghostly caress, sends shivers down his spine. He's trapped, drowning as the mermaid madness embraces him. Sol B's voice echoes, a hopeful smile playing on her lips. Was this what he wanted, amidst mermaid madness? Is it good? A wave of nausea crashed, threatening to pull him under. He thought, just what's happening to me now? It had to be mermaid madness. Hee-seong stared blankly, hands pressed against the cold refrigerator. Another door slammed shut in this ever-growing mermaid madness. A chill ran down Hee-seong's spine. This was now his life? I got goosebumps, he muttered, overwhelmed in mermaid mayhem. Holding the water pitcher, Hae-sung wondered if Sil-bi was trying to get a rise out of him, and the thought of a bath was unsettling. Oh! The word slips from his lips as water spills, a chilling reminder of the depths he's diving into of mermaid madness. Dipping toes into the water, Hae-seong could not shake a sense of impending change. This mermaid madness was too much. The hair hides her face, but the message is clear. A meeting needed to happen, just the two of us, she said, and his heart sank. A dizzying spell washed over. Hee-seong stumbles back from the encounter. The mermaid madness was not ending here. His shoulders slumped. Another request, another demand. This mermaid madness never ends. Maybe he never would leave? Stumbling, Hae-sung nearly faceplants. Reality blurred, a terrifying hangover from the karaoke mermaid madness trip, and whatever's coming. Terror gripped him. It's worse than before, he thought, his hand trembling, his mind now questioning his mermaid madness existence. Hae-sung heard his name echo, the karaoke, the kiss, Seol-bi. It was all a blur of impending doom and mermaid madness. He was going crazy, he thought. The guilt of being the reason this was happening was becoming unbearable. Apologizing felt so cringy now. Confusion lines Hae-seong's face. Was this really happening? He forced a smile, mumbling thanks, still reeling from the mermaid madness. The friends exclaimed in unison, relief washing over them. They had hoped that these two made up amidst mermaid madness. Seol-bi? Voices rang out, a chorus of shock and suspicion. It was a unanimous call to action in this impending karaoke mermaid madness. Her eyes darted around, confusion etching itself on her face. A lone bird chirped. What was this strange world in mermaid mayhem? Sol-bi's face lit up, murmuring, yes. Her heart fluttered with excitement and anticipation amidst the growing mermaid madness. Hae-sung pondered if it would be acceptable, as he promised himself that he would protect himself by any means and end mermaid madness. Hae-seong swallowed hard. Sul-bi, do you... he began, questioning everything. Was he really ready to dive deeper into mermaid madness? With a mischievous glint in her eyes, Sul-bi smiled. A knowing, playful invitation hung in the air. Go ahead, she dared him. Hae-sung smiled sweetly, asking if there was any old clothing lying around. The request itself was simple, amidst the coming mermaid madness. Hae-sung sighed. He wished he could buy new clothes for Sul-bi, but he was broke. His brow furrowed. Huh? Sul-bi tilted her head, confused. Hae-sung looked on, his eyes wide, as she desperately asked for any clothes not used anymore. What was happening now, in this mermaid mess? Glum, she apologized for the sudden request, then quickly added it was no biggie if he couldn't help amidst mermaid madness. The closet stood, a hollow promise, empty, branded across the void, mocking his inability to provide amidst the growing mermaid madness. Why would she offer her own clothes, she demanded, clinging to the closet for dear life. The mermaid madness never relents. One friend thought about the meeting, wondering why it had to be so private. Another nods, agreeing about how he led her on. A desperate cry rang. It was not the end of the story. Yet how far they'd plunged into karaoke mermaid madness. Doors slammed. The friends jumped in shock. The other friend's face was of pure shock. What karaoke mermaid madness next? A massive pile of clothes hid Hae-seong, who was barely visible. The weight of generosity was now crushing him in mermaid madness. Hae-seong hesitantly accepted the pile of clothes, wondering how he'd repay such kindness. Mermaid madness made him ask the question. "I have plenty," she assures, smiling softly. Another burden piled on, but he had a trick up his sleeve, a plan that sent a jolt through him as the mermaid madness swirled. With a flash of purple, she begins to cut through the last threads. Mermaid madness couldn't hold her back now. A beach trip? With friends? The excitement was palpable as the news came. Maybe some relief from mermaid madness finally. Holding the clothes close, the offer was delivered. They were only for him. His heart skipped. Beach trip mermaid madness? Hae-seong trails off, a sea of questions swirling. Beach trip? All the girls? He's not prepared for this level of mermaid madness. Her friends erupted with glee, thinking this beach trip was perfect as she sashayed to show him the clothes to cause mermaid madness. Childish laughter and squabbling filled the air as they demanded wedding invites. Someone chided them for getting ahead of themselves in the mermaid madness. She strikes a pose, clearly excited to show off the new clothes. The beach trip was officially one step closer amidst the karaoke mermaid madness. Hae-seong agrees, nodding, as she insists the clothing really suits him, but maybe he was ready for the beach trip mermaid madness? He sighed, plotting his next move. He needed her in a good mood. Maybe then she wouldn't act so crazy with mermaid madness. She admitted the dress was pretty, but she preferred the old shirt because it was the first gift amidst mermaid madness. She pointed out that the old shirt was too small and a ragged choice, especially when she had so graciously offered the dress. He muttered, I guess, questioning her intentions. Did she really think he couldn't buy his own clothes amidst mermaid madness? Hae-seong realized the beach trip wasn't just about new clothes. It was about seeing the ocean again, a step deeper into mermaid madness. He shivered at the memory of his last plunge. Maybe this beach trip was a really bad idea to even start mermaid madness. She challenged, a hint of accusation in her eyes. He shrunk, a silent flinch betraying a truth he tried so hard to deny. A surge of hurt flooded. Her eyes pierced through, the unspoken words hung heavy. Why him? Especially after all this mermaid madness. Hopeful gaze locks with his. Was it all in his head, or was she leading him deeper into this ocean of endless possibilities? Hae-seong gaped, a whirlwind brewing. He blurted, "How did you see that?" amidst the ever-churning chaos of mermaid madness. Sol B tightened her grip on the garment, pulling it taut. What was it about this gift that stirred her so amidst mermaid madness? A chilling command cut through the air. Get inside the water right now. Fear laced the room and mermaid madness ensued. Terror filled Hae-seong's eyes. What had he done? He was now too deep in this mermaid madness pit and can't return. Confusion swam in his eyes, the command echoing cold and stark. This beach trip, this mermaid madness, was spiraling out of control. She glanced back, eyes sharp with an unreadable purpose. He could see the terror as they descended into mermaid madness. The tale glistened as a siren song called, an invitation to face the truth, a brutal showing of mermaid madness reality. Gagging, he splashes water on his face, feeling like a washed-up fish in the bathtub. Something felt wrong. Mermaid madness was now too close. A gasp escaped. She'd been forced to do something, clearly. All that came out was a pained, in pure mermaid madness dread. Panting, Hae-seong collapses onto the nearby surface, the weight of it all crashing. The beach trip was an actual mermaid madness. Hae-seong stared, lost in thought. Was he seriously going to go on a beach trip? How could he say no to mermaid madness? His tan pants barely visible, he gripped the countertop. What did he have to do to stop this mermaid madness? She sank into the bath, exhaustion pulling her under. Another wave of helplessness pulled her deeper into mermaid madness. Panic swelled as Hae-seong realized his fate was sealed. He was at her mercy, forever bound by this ever-growing mermaid madness. Hae-seong's voice boomed, questioning how many times he had to repeat himself about the bath and who was at the receiving end. I had to do it for science homework, she explained, but someone nearby was not buying it and ready to question mermaid madness. Rage bubbled. He erupted. If she remembered anything, this would have happened somewhere else, somewhere out of his sight amidst mermaid madness. A wave of panic hit. When had he lost his name tag? His friend spoke quickly. Name tags were important, it seemed. The mermaid madness. Haesung's hand trembled as he touched his shirt pocket. Lost in thought about what to do, his anxiety now building in mermaid madness. Lost in thought, Hee-seong scribbles away, unaware his life is about to get much more complicated due to mermaid madness. Yunhai's words echoed. She could only control water nearby. Haesung thought the body of water needed to be large and to consider her spying. The mermaid madness. Reality shattered around him. A shocking realization jolted Hae-seong. The beach trip was definitely part of her mermaid madness plan. His fingers grazed the fabric, panic clawing at his throat. Had he lost the name tag that was to stop mermaid madness? Someone yelped, scared after a sudden action. The class murmured, startled, as a student quickly apologized. This mermaid madness never ends. A frantic plea for paper towels echoed through the classroom, unanswered. Someone else snorted. No one ever prepared for mermaid madness. Juyeon was tasked to go to the bathroom after a large spill. Was it another step in mermaid madness? His eyes widened, a cold wave washing over him. This wasn't just a trip. She planned all along in this mermaid madness. The classroom fan whirs, a mocking reminder of the beach's breeze Hae-seong will face soon, diving into mermaid madness again. Juyeon spoke, saying she needs to raise some money. A flustered classmate stared, mouth agape. What sort of scheme was brewing now in mermaid madness? Oh, thanks. She appreciated their consideration. Maybe everyone wasn't so bad after all. A box of tissues did mean they cared in mermaid madness. A bead of sweat trickled down Hee-seong's brow. The reality of this beach trip became a cold, clammy dread of mermaid madness. Someone dropped something, a chaotic scramble unfolding in the classroom as they scramble. Did she notice his distress, or was it mermaid madness? Words cut like shards of glass. He seemed so harsh. Did she really have to clean it up? Another page to dive deeper into mermaid madness. A rhythmic tapping echoed. Haesung's fingers danced on the table. The impending beach trip was a trap, a bait to draw him deeper into mermaid madness. A note, stark and folded, materialized, its message taunting, yet concerned. Was this more mermaid madness, or something else entirely? A shrug rippled through the classroom. Uncertainty hung heavy. Was this beach trip actually going to happen? He thought of mermaid madness. A folded note lands on the table, a silent summons amidst the beach trip anxiety and ongoing mermaid madness. Tap. He unfolded the note. Something wrong? It asked. The answer was stark. No. But something was wrong. The beach trip screamed mermaid madness. Doubt gnawed as he scribbled. Should he say something? His mind races, and he scratches out his uncle's name. Who could save him from mermaid madness? His hands clutched at his head. If he spoke about his mermaid madness concerns, they'd laugh. Was it all a joke to everyone? The soft fabric brushed against him, a silent reminder of the impending beach trip's looming sense of inescapable mermaid madness. He leaned back in the car, eyes closed as the group drove. Was he finally succumbing to this inevitable mermaid madness? Hae-seong tried to appear casual as they drove, his smile a fragile mask. The beach trip loomed, a siren's call to mermaid madness. One pointed accusingly, declaring he'd figured it out. The others grinned, ready to tease Hae-seong. Beach trip mermaid madness was primed. A collective groan arose, someone quipping, "Couldn't you find a nicer place?" A stinky smell suddenly filled the car. Mermaid madness struck again. The stink was potent, but how had they even gotten a room? Apparently, Soonbin's uncle had begged, and it was mermaid madness level desperate. Hae-seong felt green around the gills. He wouldn't let car sickness ruin this. "I'll catch up in a bit," he muttered. The beach stretched out before them, a vast expanse of sunshine, but Hae-seong felt trapped, dreading mermaid madness and this trip. She reaches out, a gentle touch. He needs something more, when all they have is never-ending mermaid madness. Her hand trembled as she touched her cheek, a chilling realization setting. This beach trip was not going to fix mermaid madness. Tears threatened to spill as the words echoed, "You have no choice." Was this mermaid madness never going to end? A shudder racked Hae-seong, a vision of her, a mermaid among his friends. That was a scary thought amidst mermaid madness. The cool, tiled wall offered a stark contrast to the rising panic. This beach trip was not going to end happily, she thought. He grabbed a drink from the fridge, but something still felt off. Was this beach trip really what he thought he wanted? He gulped down the water, a desperate attempt to wash away the creeping dread. The beach trip loomed, a promise of mermaid madness. The air thickens. A sudden statement hangs between them, as the looming beach trip threatens to reveal all of the mermaid madness. His brow furrowed. The beach trip loomed, and the air felt thick with secrets and the promise of even more mermaid madness. Sharp knives glinted, cold steel promising harm. The beach trip loomed, a potential massacre amidst mermaid madness. The sunset was stunning, yet Sulbi focused on how much money was spent. Hyeseong face palms in karaoke mermaid madness. He couldn't believe Hyeseong holed up all day, especially since he paid about $300 for this trip to ignore mermaid madness. The girls exclaimed they were back, a chorus ringing loud. They were concerned. Hyeseong, are you okay? Beach trip mermaid madness continued. A friend apologized for not cooking anything, as the other boys cheered. Sashimi was here, and they're ready to forget this mermaid madness. As the sashimi arrived, Hyeseong quickly volunteered, eager to get the chaos of chopsticks sorted so mermaid madness would have to wait. He opened the bottle, its creak echoing his thoughts. This place was a ghost town. An hour wasted on sashimi, adding to the mermaid madness. Hyeseong stared at the sushi. How did you buy that? He stammered, thinking all the money was spent fighting mermaid madness. Boredom sunk in like a stone. No karaoke, no fireworks. Pass it around, someone drawled, accepting the lack of beach trip mermaid madness. Solbi offered sashimi with a bright, playful grin. Hyeseong politely declined, stomach churning. He could not handle any beach trip mermaid madness. An unspoken tension filled the room. The air crackled. What's wrong with you today? Someone demanded, as the karaoke mermaid madness boiled over. He just mopes. Beach trip wasted, someone complains, frustration brewing over Hyeseong's complete lack of participation in beach trip mermaid madness. He sighed. He was so over this beach trip, all because Solbi was leading him into mermaid madness. Chuckling, one friend pointed out the obvious as Hyeseong sat apart, shoulders hunched. Was mermaid madness finally taking its toll? Smirking, she giggled how she couldn't believe that she would be seeing Hyeseong like this, but what would happen next with mermaid madness? Staring off into the distance, Hyeseong was lost in thought. Was this mermaid madness ever going to end? A silent struggle unfolds, a mysterious aura of light and dark clash as the reality of the beach trip and mermaid madness settles in. Despair took hold as Hyeseong hid his face. Was mermaid madness ever going to stop? It was all too much. Her hand reaches out, a force pulling him closer, back into her world of mermaid madness. It's time to pay up. A thump echoes inside Hyeseong's skull. He's trapped, another victim to the beach trip and its brewing mermaid madness. Hyeseong taps his head, trying to shut down the thoughts, while Solbi hopes this will get them out of mermaid madness. The question hung heavy. Future plans felt like a distant shore. Hyeseong tapped his head, dreading life decisions and all this mermaid madness. The words hung. Jae-jung was going to art school, he blurted. How about that? This did not help with beach trip mermaid madness. A statement sliced through the room. The girls will be at Jucheong? Was their future sealed amidst this beach trip mermaid madness? Hyeseong confessed he'd considered an all-boys school, then quickly admitted academics weren't his forte, a distraction from mermaid madness. Another friend quipped, well, where would you go to avoid studying? It's either all boys or mermaid madness. He can't win. The other's plans hung in the air, a stark contrast to his own growing dread. What plans could he even make amidst mermaid madness? An all-boys school? To care for his sister? Hyeseong's options were dwindling as mermaid madness continued on this weird beach trip. Hyeseong muffled protests as someone covered his mouth, demanding he button up while someone snidely muttered about proud parents as beach trip mermaid madness brews. Sarcasm dripped like venom. To succeed against the odds would be a parent's dream come true, he thought, smiling thinly during mermaid madness. The room hushed. All chatter ceased. One admitted to them all that they did not have any parents. The air thickened with sympathy. His head was spinning. What could he possibly say? He was losing a grip on this karaoke beach trip mermaid madness. Confusion lingered, a silent question. Was this awkward quietness part of the mermaid madness plan, or something else? He asks why everyone looks so sad. The other's head shakes rapidly. Was she giving up? Should he stop with the mermaid madness? The words hung heavy. She got rid of her phone. Good for studying anyway, she thought, but really this was a trick of mermaid madness. A wave of dizziness crashed over him. Am I drunk? Hee-seong thought, now seriously questioning his sanity amidst mermaid madness. The tiled walls felt cold. The elevator promised something ahead, but for now the mermaid madness continues on. Tears welled, heavy with a truth she couldn't deny. Would he ever truly understand this siren song of mermaid madness? Sweat dripped, glistening. Hee-seong's eyes drooped. The elevator ride loomed, another level deeper into mermaid madness. Hee-seong shot up, disoriented. He questioned if he'd fallen asleep and suddenly felt the repercussions of mermaid madness. Hee-seong peeked through the curtains. The elevator loomed. He wondered if he should escape the beach trip mermaid madness. Sunlight pierced through the gap, illuminating a room full of snoring beach trip casualties. Hee-seong questioned all this mermaid madness. A faint rustle broke the silence. Hee-seong fidgeted near the feet. The looming elevator was a portal to deeper mermaid madness. Shadowed figure loomed over the knife block, an unsettling promise. The quiet snap before the elevator and mermaid madness bruise. Hidden in shadows, a hooded figure stared intensely. The gleam of metal hinted at the dark choices in this beach trip mermaid madness. Swa! The ocean called to Sulby, a siren song pulling her toward the water as all this mermaid madness came back. He stares at the ocean. A silent promise hangs in the air. Maybe, just maybe. It will be okay, he thought, ending mermaid madness. He stood back to the camera, gazing out at the beach. Whatever mermaid madness would happen, he was ready, or so he hoped. A hand tugged at Hye-seong's cloak, and a silent plea filled his gaze. Could this be his chance to fix mermaid madness? He grabbed tightly at the sleeve. Did he really have to go? The beach held only mermaid madness, so he tried to decline. Are you going to kill yourself because it's too hard? He yelled, shaking Hye-seong roughly. More mermaid madness? I know it has been tough! Hye-seong flinched at the shouted question. We all came here together, so how could you do this? To add to the mermaid madness. Clutching a knife, Hye-seong struggles, demanding release. Panic flared. The beach trip has become a fight for survival against mermaid madness. How can I even calm down? Hye-seong yelled, panicking. He's asked what he remembers as the beach and mermaid madness threatens to drown him. Hye-seong's voice cracked. Urgency filled his tone. Soon-bin, you need to get out of the water right now. What's in the sea of mermaid madness? Hands gripped at his collar, fear radiating. He screamed it was too dangerous. But Soon-bin was now entering the sea of mermaid madness. Because you're not his real friend, Sulby stated, her gaze intense. Maybe it was time for Hye-seong to start choosing sides in mermaid madness. He stared, a blush creeping up his neck. What was happening? The beach trip was spiraling further into mermaid madness as his hands shook. He looked around, still dazed, but a creeping unease settled deep. Soon-bin's safety was paramount amidst the beach trip mermaid madness. She looked back at the horizon, lost in thought. The mermaid madness and beach trip loomed, and she needed a way out. Desperation welled inside as Hee-seong felt something he didn't want to. He was already too deep in the mermaid madness. Sylvie's voice trembled, accusatory and tearful. Hye-seong, I thought... Alone. Why did you bring him? She's cornered by mermaid madness. Sylvie's voice resonated, a deep sorrow and betrayal. Hee-seong, I thought... Alone. Why did you bring him? A mermaid madness trap. A sharp, who's that? Escaped, his grip tightening. The new presence shattered their already fragile bubble of mermaid madness. Everything spiraled, a cold dread washed over him. He was in too deep now, and mermaid madness was all his fault. Hye-seong stares with an intense gaze. He knew she was going to ask. The end of the beach trip mermaid madness, he hoped. She hunched, shivering. The sand offered little warmth. Why did he always bring others to witness her mermaid madness? A golden dress, it seems as sharp as truth, brushes against her leg. He needs to tell Sulby something about mermaid madness. She sat, back turned, the golden dress mocking her with its sharp seams. The tide crept closer, a herald of beach trip mermaid madness. Panic welled as he spotted Sulby. Something was terribly wrong. Another screamed, horrified, as he saw she had no legs anymore. Sulby's calm demeanor belied the storm within. Listen, she demands, because she knows that everyone's stuck in mermaid madness. Her voice echoes in his mind. He remembers they share secrets, and a cold dread washes. Has he forgotten about the mermaid madness? Hee-seong snapped. This was too much. He couldn't handle one more second of this insane beach trip mermaid madness. In a flash, Hee-seong grabbed her. All the fun ended as the weight of their situation fell. Mermaid madness consumes. Water swirling around the pants was all she saw as Hee-seong grabbed her, their mermaid madness situation taking a turn for the worst. A gasp escapes Seulbi, but Hee-seong quickly covers her mouth. The beach trip mermaid madness has begun, and she couldn't tell them her tale. He was held, trapped. Why are you doing this to me? He questioned, as the beach trip mermaid madness reached its peak. Hee-seong choked, tears blurring his vision. Sulby wasn't a real friend, constantly endangering him in this mermaid madness. Hee-seong felt something was brewing for him and the others. Everyone was trapped in this terrible loop of mermaid madness. A tight grip pressed against his mouth. The beach trip was a disaster, a non-stop horror of mermaid madness. Everything felt wrong. That's what I don't like, he thought, as this warped beach trip mermaid madness reached new heights. Sulby sputtered. Why did he not understand? You treat me like the other kids, she croaked, as beach trip mermaid madness reached a boiling point. Sulby whispered he should know she was special. The ocean breeze carried her words as Hee-seong braced for more mermaid madness. Hee-seong stammers, but his plea dies in his throat as he hears the sharp words and cannot believe the mermaid madness. Tears threaten to spill. Sulby questions Hee-seong, declaring he doesn't even want to try to see her for who she is in mermaid madness. Tears welled in his eyes. This was it. He was done. He couldn't keep fighting mermaid madness anymore. He was drained. A cold blade appeared as their fragile peace dissolved. Beach trip or mermaid madness had been a horror dream. Panic seized him. This beach trip had gone too far. What? He sputtered, as the blade glinted in the sun of mermaid madness. Tears threatened to spill as she asked, See? A cold blade appeared as their fragile peace dissolved into mermaid madness. His voice trembled, a whispered denial. Not Yunhai too, trapped in Sulby's dangerous mermaid madness world. Stuck in the water, Hee-seong stared back, a silent question etched on his face. What now, amidst this unending mermaid madness? A glint of metal reflects in her eyes, a chilling resolve. Protecting him from me, Sulby admits. It may save him from mermaid madness. Her words hung in the air. She remembered a different time, a forgotten place. Mullet Island and mermaid madness. Sulby's face twists. I don't like it. But the words barely scratch the surface as mermaid madness consumes her from the inside. She felt a sense of guilt. This is all for that boy, she thought, wondering if the mermaid madness was really worth it. The realization struck Hee-seong like a tidal wave. The beach trip had become something he could no longer control. Mermaid madness. Sulby swore she'd ensure his silence, a fierce promise hanging in the air like an unsettling siren song amidst mermaid madness. Desperation etched across his face, Hee-seong begged. Let him go, he pleaded. This mermaid madness had gone far enough. What you need is right here, she whispered, gently taking his hand. The mermaid madness was closing in, and she swore, I'll make all your wishes. The name Mula Island echoes, a phantom memory. What happened there? It all began with a beach trip and mermaid madness. Okay, Hee-seong thought as his stomach did somersaults. He'd follow her straight into this chaotic mermaid madness if he had to. Her eyes bore into his soul, searching. The softly spoken question hung heavy as mermaid madness reached its crescendo. That's what you want, right? Seulbi suggested they discuss it after Soonbin left the water, and touch appears to make more of this insane mermaid madness. Haeseong staggered, the weight of her words crashing over him. Everything wobbled. Was this the real end to mermaid madness? Haeseong splashed forward, desperate. Yoonhae stood motionless in the waves. This desperate move would hopefully end all the mermaid madness. Haeseong's grip tightened as Yoonhae tried to pull away from the water. It was all connected, this mermaid madness, the beach and all. Haeseong flinched at the question. He knew she was not okay. He could not believe he had to decline, but did anyway. Silent tears trickled down Seulbi's face. Was she destined to always be alone, entangled in mermaid madness? The water swirled around her dress, clinging like secrets. Mullet Island, she'd thought, held the key to stopping mermaid madness. Sunlight seemed to mock as it bore down, the weight of the beach, the mermaid madness of it all. It never ends. Haeseong's confusion deepened as something was said, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts of beach trip mermaid madness. He grabbed Seulbi, not ready to dive into her ocean of mermaid madness. The grip was tight, a silent promise. A name surfaces, barely a whisper in the rising chaos. Could Yoonhae hold a key to unraveling this mermaid madness? He looks out at the ocean, knowing this trip has only dragged them all into a sea of troubles for mermaid madness. A desperate splash rings. Someone cries out as Haeseong lunges into the ocean, chasing after, into this awful mermaid madness. Yoonhae trembled. Everything felt out of control, wrong. Concern painted Haeseong's face. What new terror had mermaid madness wrought? A desperate cry broke through the air. Something tugged, pulling them down into the depths. Mermaid madness claims another victim. Panic bubbled beneath the surface as Haeseong struggled with his conflicted feelings during a trip gone awry from mermaid madness. A silent scream echoed in Haeseong's mind. No! This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The mermaid madness had to end. Haeseong grabs at Yoonhae, panic etched in his eyes. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a desperate gamble to end mermaid madness. Haeseong's grip tightens, sweat stinging his eyes. She won't budge, he thought, struggling to fight the mermaid madness pull. Haeseong's desperation peaked. He cried for Yoonhae to let go, but something held her firm. Mermaid madness was getting out of control. Down in the murky depths, the transformation was complete. A haunting green tail replaced her legs as mermaid madness took over. The water consumed her. As Yoonhae sank further, all that mermaid madness became truth, not a dream. Sunlight glints on water droplets as a soft white cloth shifts. The world fades as Yoonhae succumbs to mermaid madness. Desperate, Soonbin squeezed, pain throbbing as Haeseong grabbed him. He did not want to be saved from mermaid madness. Bones snapped like twigs underfoot. Desperation fueled his grip as fingers bent at unnatural angles in mermaid madness. A sharp crack echoed, bones giving way. His wrist screamed in protest, a fresh wave of panic threatening to drown him in mermaid madness. The churning water seemed to mock him. This wasn't a beach trip, it was a watery grave drowned in mermaid madness. Tears streamed down Haeseong's face, the ocean waves calling to him with only his name. What was he going to do about mermaid madness? Splash! She lost something, but what? The mermaid madness beach trip had spiraled, and her hair swirled in the growing chaos. Tears streamed down Haeseong's face, but he spoke up. But don't worry, he isn't dead yet, he reassured, regarding mermaid madness. Have anything to say to me? Her pale face, framed by dark strands, held a haunting stillness as this mermaid madness reached its crescendo. She touched his face, a silent demand. What did she want him to confess? The beach trip mermaid madness was spiraling again. Mullet Island. Tears blurred his vision. He had hurt her, again. I'm sorry, I hurt you, he whispered, as mermaid madness continued to grow. A tear streaks down her cheek, not the memory he's searching for. Not that, she breathes, lost in mermaid madness. Darkness swam before his vision, and a voice echoed, "Try again." He knew he had to keep searching and stop the mermaid madness. She's trapped in his embrace, tears finally flowing. The beach trip mermaid madness had broken her, but he was here now. Keep going until you get it right, echoes in his mind, a mantra repeating as the weight of this mermaid madness settles. Sinam police station stood tall. The sign proclaiming 4 major crimes felt like a cruel joke given the mermaid madness plaguing them. "This is embarrassing," he admits, as Soonbin nods, agreeing to face whatever lies ahead alone in this mermaid madness trip. Resolve hardens the first man's face, "Then I'll take him alone." The second waves it off, saying sure, adding to mermaid madness. He drones on about legal guardian policies, but Soonbin's far away. Did he really have to dive into mermaid madness alone? He nods, the single word hanging heavy with resignation. To face mermaid madness alone. Yes, he says, defeated. Overwhelmed, Hyeseong stared blankly, the word ocean still lingering. What dark depths awaited amidst this never-ending mermaid madness? He confessed he arose early. The floor was wet with seawater. The lingering brine smells like the never-ending mermaid madness. But Soonbin followed. Hyeseong knew this wasn't good. The wet floor was a chilling reminder of the mermaid madness. His face scrunched with a mixture of disgust and resignation. Ugh! He was done. The mermaid madness sloshed around them. Crack! The sound echoed. Tears streamed down Hyeseong's face as he looked at his ruined wrist after mermaid madness took control. The elevator shuddered, a metallic coffin descending, each floor bringing him closer to the heart of this twisted beach trip mermaid madness. Hyeseong. He heard his name, but the elevator descended. Each drop was another stab of guilt, drowning him in mermaid madness fear. Hyeseong recoiled as papers scattered, heart pounding. The beach trip mermaid madness has turned his life into a jump scare. A sharp "what's wrong?" cut through the tense air. The elevator stalled, an omen in their beach trip mermaid madness. Sweat beaded. Hyeseong was at his limit. The guilt and confusion twisted. I can't do this, he choked, struggling with mermaid madness. Hyeseong clutches his shirt, gasping. Memories elude him as the elevator descends further into mermaid madness. He just can't think. The elevator stalled again, the shoes scuffing as Hyeseong shifted. Would he ever get out of this never-ending mermaid madness? Panic flared in the room. "Detective! My son's preparing for the art school entrance exam right now!" she exclaimed, fearing the mermaid madness will affect his chances. A gasp of shock, his life story revealed like a terrible secret. The mermaid madness had reached this level now? Guilt and panic crescendoed. "Quiet! All your fault!" she shrieked, striking out, blaming him, the beach trip mermaid madness's puppet. He remembered now. They had been best friends. He thought he was going crazy, as he'd forgotten their friendship amidst mermaid madness. Tapping echoed as the detective worked. He wasn't going to let Hyeseong or the others down, not while mermaid madness swirled. He smiled, hoping against hope. "There's no way Hyeseong would do something to Soonbin," he said, clinging to any innocence in mermaid madness. Soonbin knew better than to poke the sleeping dragon and mention family. Hyeseong remembered he was always careful, too careful, about what was said and done. His face was clammy. "How many beers did you drink?" The unspoken question hung heavier. "How much do you remember of mermaid madness?" The door creaked open, his face etched with confusion, but a question lingered heavily. How did they even find him, let alone his home address? The homeroom teacher asked if he ate, but Hyeseong trailed off. He was in too deep now with mermaid madness. An echo hung in the air as the elevator continued, its descent into the core of mermaid madness. He hesitantly asked if it was all right for him to go, but it felt more like a desperate plea to escape mermaid madness. Dots float in his vision as he hears, "Look at me, Hyeseong!" The beach trip mermaid madness was at it again. The homeroom teacher shook Hyeseong, claiming they all felt the same way. Was he really that transparent with his mermaid madness? The words hung heavy. Running wouldn't prove innocence, but staying meant confronting a truth they both desperately wanted to avoid, and mermaid madness. A voice echoed, stating someone didn't kill Soonbin, but the words seemed distant. A truth he couldn't grasp in mermaid madness. The flowers surrounding were beginning to wilt. Hyeseong was already there, his face etched with an unearned sadness. He has to end the mermaid madness. Flowers drooped. The scent of lilies and guilt mingled with the stench of seawater and reminded him of mermaid madness. Relief washes over them. There you are, Hee-seong says, beckoning. But what waited inside? More mermaid madness? Dread pooled in Hee-seong's gut. Relief gave way to renewed anxiety. The stench of lilies, Soonbin's picture. Was he next in mermaid madness? Hye-seong was there. The flowers, the lilies, Soonbin's picture loomed. Rest in peace! The mermaid madness must end. He offered a silent nod, the weight of loss heavy on his shoulders as the lilies mocked him with their beauty amidst mermaid madness. Namui Guan, Sumin Huang, and Yubin Guan flickered on screen near buttons for wake and burial. Reality sunk in during mermaid madness. His arrival rippled through the room, a silent announcement. Hye-seong's here. He's the main suspect, and more mermaid madness. Footsteps echoed. The air thickened with unspoken accusations. He had to keep going, into the heart of this beach trip mermaid madness. Hee-seong glanced aside, but the spectacled gaze remained, another puzzle piece regarding Soonbin, the mermaid madness. Hye-seong bowed low, the weight of Soonbin's death pressed down. This performance felt like a twisted parody in the mermaid madness. His gaze was glued to the floor. Soonbin was dead. This was too much. He was drowning in mermaid madness' awful consequences. Her tears flowed and she wiped at her eyes. Soonbin was gone. This damn beach trip mermaid madness had taken everything. His hand gripped her shoulder, a desperate plea for understanding or perhaps a warning about mermaid madness' next move. Sweetheart, don't say anything. The air thickens. Hee-seong kneels, a puppet in a tragic play, and is drowning in mermaid madness. Incense smoke curled, weaving a bittersweet farewell. Grief hung thick, a suffocating reminder of the never-ending mermaid madness. Guilt gnaws at him. The flowers offer no solace as he sits at the wake, praying this mermaid madness would just go away. Hye-seong knelt in the seawater, a chilling splash. Was he praying for forgiveness for what this beach trip mermaid madness became? The ocean water glimmers, reflecting the harsh light of the room in an awful reminder of mermaid madness and death. Water dripped from his sleeves. He felt cold. This whole place had been tainted with a feeling of mermaid madness. Tears fell onto the floor, a silent apology. All he could do was kneel as this awful beach trip mermaid madness went on. A sharp pain shot through him as Hye-seong gripped his ruined wrist. The mermaid madness was crushing him. He just wanted out. A jolt coursed through him. His hands trembled. This wake felt like a bad dream, a terrible joke thanks to mermaid madness. Whispers filled the air as everyone murmured, all the kids were too hot. Another asked, does anyone have a mirror? Amid mermaid madness. Another asks how he looks, but the distraction failed. Everything felt wrong. He didn't even look at me, he whined, regarding mermaid madness. A forced smile couldn't mask the tension as the camera clicked, another snapshot in this twisted beach trip mermaid madness. Hye-seong shifted as directed. They needed the perfect picture for the funeral, didn't they, as mermaid madness reached its apex. The flash blinded them. Click, and another memory etched in permanence, the mermaid madness ever twisting the knife. Hye-seong stared blankly. The camera flash had stolen his soul. The mermaid madness was only beginning at this fake funeral. The brown-striped tie and suit are a stark contrast to the flowers. Soonbin would have hated this whole show of mermaid madness. Hye-seong stared ahead, his gaze distant and haunted, the beach trip mermaid madness finally taking its toll. They bowed in unison, a wave of grief washing over them. All were trapped in this tide of loss from mermaid madness. Someone whispers Hee-seong's name, hesitant. Guilt hangs heavy, an invisible shroud suffocating him in this sea of mermaid madness. A pallid face and terror-stricken eyes begged for a simple truth. It was just an accident, wasn't it? She feared mermaid madness. His brow furrowed. Why would she bring that up now? Was she the only one who couldn't stand this charade of grief and mermaid madness? Hee-seong's arms shook. Her face was so close and desperate. His fragile control was slipping amidst the mermaid madness. She declared that they'd been close at school. Hee-seong didn't respond as the awful beach trip mermaid madness went on. Fierce words erupted, a desperate denial of the grim present. You came to our house. I even cooked. Beach trip mermaid madness continues. A heart-wrenching sob cuts through the air. Soonbin's father cries out, the grief and unbearable weight as mermaid madness takes hold. A grave tone hung in the air. Hyeseong and Jaejong were the focus of their ire, more mermaid madness. Her gaze never wavered, never faltered. Her command cut through the grief. "Follow me," she ordered. The beach trip mermaid madness continues. Grief hung heavy as the group waits. The bus stop felt like a holding cell, each minute amplifying mermaid madness. Smoke danced from her fingertips, a fragile rebellion against the crushing grief and impending doom of mermaid madness. Hyeseong glances. Jaejong is nervous, a bead of sweat forming. How deep did this beach trip mermaid madness go? The air crackled with tension. She tapped a rhythm of grief on the coffin as she admitted the family was fractured by mermaid madness. She couldn't believe her brother, Soonbin, was truly gone. Grief twisted in her chest, adding to the mermaid madness she had already. The rigid collar felt like a noose. Hyeseong was sure Soonbin wouldn't have wanted him in this formal wear during this mermaid madness. Hyeseong and Jaejong's faces were drawn, mirroring each other. The specter of Soonbin and the haunting mermaid madness haunted them. The unspoken truth loomed. Silence hangs heavy, pregnant with unspoken accusations regarding Soonbin's and his death due to mermaid madness. Hyeseong hears his name. Hesitation flickered across his face. What did they want from him now? He dreads the mermaid madness. A comforting hug smothers Hyeseong. Jaejong's stunned, his glasses betraying his surprise at this vulnerable display amidst the mermaid madness. Wrapped in a hug, the comforting words, "I'm sure it was just an accident," rang hollow amidst this mermaid madness. A firm voice declared, "We'll ask the police to stop investigating." The decision was made, but would it quell the mermaid madness? "I believe it was an accident," Hyeseong stated, clinging to the idea. If it wasn't, the mermaid madness would just keep going. The three boys walked together. Jaejong grabbed at his head, nervous. Where was this bus even going, further into mermaid madness? "Yubin. So I'm begging you," Hyeseong whispered, clinging to her, his voice thick with desperation to escape the beach trip mermaid madness. Hyeseong whispers, pleading with Yubin to stop this beach trip. The never-ending mermaid madness had to cease. Yubin's words hung in the air. Stay a while, leave quietly. Was this her twisted way of ending the mermaid madness? A silent, commanding drop echoed. Yubin's words lingered, heavy as the grief that shrouded them, and mermaid madness. His voice echoed, a hollow promise masked as concern. That would be best for you too, as mermaid madness lurked nearby. Desperation clawed. Hyeseong watched her go. Did he dare let her walk into whatever awaited? The beach trip mermaid madness would never end. Hyeseong's shoulders slumped in defeat as Yubin walked away to whatever fate awaited her amidst mermaid madness. He didn't move. Peeking around the corner, Hyeseong watched Yubin disappear into the building, alone against the mermaid madness within. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. A bead of moisture touched his skin. Is it starting to rain? Amid mermaid madness. Rain? It barely registers, just a touch more misery atop this mountain of mermaid madness. Anyway, he trailed off. He suddenly declared it was time to leave, claiming he needed to go home. His companion asks, baffled, was he already cracking under mermaid madness? Panic clawed at Hyeseong's throat, a silent scream. He couldn't stay here, not a moment longer. The mermaid madness was closing in. Hyeseong rushes away, desperate to escape the looming wake, as a voice calls out, questioning his hasty departure from mermaid madness. He bolted, a desperate flight. The walls blurred as Hyeseong ran, the phantom wake a chilling backdrop in mermaid madness. Waves lapped, the water's surface a distorted mirror. A question hung heavy with accusation. What was Hyeseong done wrong in mermaid madness? Rain streamed down, blurring the edges of reality as Hyeseong stood alone, the weight of mermaid madness crushing him. Torrential rain poured, turning the world into a blurry canvas. The beach trip mermaid madness now feels like a distant memory. Hyeseong tilted his head back, allowing the rain to wash over him, as if cleansing the mermaid madness away or trying. Hyeseong pressed his hands to his ears as the rain intensified. He could still hear them, the echoes of mermaid madness. Clutching the black wig to her chest, Yubin trembled. Sunbin was gone, but she refused to let mermaid madness steal her memories. The world dissolved into streaks of green and gray, the beach, Sunbin, the wake, all fading remnants of mermaid madness. Rain lashed at his face as a lone tear trickled down, the weight of Sunbin's death, the crushing guilt of mermaid madness. Heseong staggered back, his arm outstretched, reaching for something solid as the weight of Sunbin's death crashed into him with mermaid madness. Heseong's heart pounded. "Need to go out for about 3 hours," he blurted. "Huh?" As if he's making excuses for mermaid madness. The memory flickered, a haunting echo of innocence lost before the storm of mermaid madness crashed over them all, she thought sadly. A leaky faucet dripped, each drop echoing Heseong's frantic heart. He was drowning, and the mermaid madness wouldn't stop. The faucet dripped, echoing Heseong's fractured thoughts. He swirls a drain cleaner, desperate to wash away mermaid madness forever. Hyeseong's thoughts swirl like the chemicals. Can he scrub away the stain of Sunbin's death and the ever-present mermaid madness? The name hung in the air, fragile hope mixed with dread. Was Yunhai the key to ending this beach trip mermaid madness? A pale hand reached out, its intentions unclear. Did it offer comfort, or was it another invitation into mermaid madness? A ghostly hand reached out. "Reach," whispered in his mind. Was it a lifeline, or another siren's call into mermaid madness? Grief painted her face. A fragile hand grasps hers, and Yunhai stares up, begging for rescue from mermaid madness. Yunhai pulls him close, her touch a desperate comfort. He hesitates, caught between solace and a chilling mermaid madness. Desperation fueled him as Hyeseong cradled Yunhai's face. She was too important to lose to mermaid madness's awful ocean call. Tears welled. He covered his mouth, shame swirling. He had to say it, desperate. "I missed you," he blurted, drowning in mermaid madness. "When you left, I realized that you're all I have," he confessed, clinging to Yunhai amidst this awful, ever-growing mermaid madness. "Take me back to Mulla Island, right now." Her voice wavered, pleading. Did she think returning would wash away the mermaid madness? Her voice, soft but firm, cut through his thoughts. Heseong. It echoed, promising answers and more mermaid madness. Tears escaped, trailing through the air. Yunhai whispered for him to take her back to Mulla Island to stop the mermaid madness. Tears streamed as the group huddled together, the weight of loss pressing on them amidst the horror of mermaid madness. The air thrummed with grief as she knelt, a broken doll. Haishang placed a hand, his touch a fragile comfort, and a fight against mermaid madness. Raindrops raced down the bus shelter. She looked lost and alone as mermaid madness swirled around her. Heseong and Yunhai stood hand in hand, water lapping their ankles. Together they faced the monstrous power of mermaid madness. Sweat beaded as he murmured, "This place hasn't changed at all. The weight of the past, the specter of mermaid madness. So peaceful and pretty," he murmurs, a watery splash underscoring Yunhai's tranquil expression, before the mermaid madness returns, looming. He smiles. Her presence, a nostalgic dream, reminds him of childhood. He was glad to have her by his side. This will end the mermaid madness. Hyeseong's resolve was unwavering. He would return home to pack, then come back. Yunhai clung to him, the only antidote to mermaid madness. Trembling fingers gripped at fabric, knuckles bone-white as a soft "okay" escaped her. Yunhai needs stability to beat mermaid madness. Her name echoes through the sterile hallway as Yubin calls desperately. But from where? Her eyes widened. Where was Heseong amidst the mermaid madness? The lab coat rustled on the door, a mocking reminder of the sterile environment Sunbin died, thanks to mermaid madness. Her voice trembled, calling out, "Heseong, are you home?" Did he abandon her again to face the mermaid madness alone? Yubin's heart pounds, echoing Sunbin's death. But where was Hyeseong? His absence was a gaping wound in the mermaid madness. Yubin's eyes searched, wide and pleading, for any sign of Heseong, any hint he wasn't gone. But mermaid madness has to end. A note explains, "I'll be away for a month. Mom filled the fridge. He should eat." Did she know how close the mermaid madness was? A chilling reminder sits on the table. Don't drain the water. What horrifying ritual awaited? A mermaid madness omen. Her eyes are wide with dawning horror. What does this mean? Yubin realized Hyeseong had fallen deeper into mermaid madness. A letter trembles in Yubin's hands. A single tear escapes. What secrets does this hold about Hyeseong and the mermaid madness? Hyeseong stares blankly ahead. Yunhai's words echoed, "I've always wanted to see your home on Mula Island," and broke his heart in mermaid madness. The water sloshed. It wasn't just any water. "What did you use to do with your family?" demanded the unasked question of mermaid madness. Crude scratch marks deface memory. A dark past claws up. What twisted family portrait is this, and what does it have to do with mermaid madness? Scratched on the doorframe were the names of Heseong and Heebin, childish marks, now a bitter reminder of a happier time before mermaid madness. Heseong smiled weakly, trying to convey a peace he did not feel. He would do anything to stop the mermaid madness. Immersed in murky water, Soonbin's ghost watched Heseong, hands clasped in despair, the mermaid madness consuming everything. A bittersweet smile graces Yunhai's face, a fragile beacon as she considers the impending storm of the mermaid madness. Hyeseong reached out, his touch tentative on Yunhai's face, searching for any sign of the girl he once knew amidst mermaid madness. He tried for reassuring, but something was wrong. The corners of his lips were just a little too high amid this mermaid madness. A weary, "yeah," escaped Heseong, resignation in his tone. How much further would this cursed mermaid madness drag them? Yunhai touched his lips with a teasing finger. "You must be excited," she cooed, but the words hung heavy with mermaid madness. He barely held it together. Not really. He wanted to escape the charade. He just wanted to be with Yunhai in mermaid madness. A piercing beep shatters the fragile calm. Yunhai offered a hand, but Hyeseong recoiled. The mermaid madness was far from over. Heseong was stunned. He thought he'd sent Heebin away, but instead it's his uncle. "Yunhai, give me a minute." The mermaid madness continues. Suddenly the door bursts open. Heseong reels, his face pale with shock. What fresh hell has the mermaid madness unleashed now? Heseong's eyes widened. He never expected this. "Why are you here?" he wondered, the shock slamming against the mermaid madness. The door clicked open, a chill greeting Heseong. His uncle was here, and he wasn't alone. "We need to talk," as mermaid madness came. Sandals stood planted on the floor, not moving. What secrets did that entrance hold? The mermaid madness will never end. Hyeseong deflected, his gaze firm. "Forget about that. We need to talk first." But Sylvie's name lingered, a sharp accusation in mermaid madness. Heseong sighed, the words a heavy weight. "You need to leave." He struggled to find the strength to fight this mermaid madness. His uncle insisted that apologizing would fix everything, returning life to normal. Hyeseong bristles, retorting he was never close to those girls. Heseong's glasses fogged. "What about me? Am I supposed to just watch you suffer like this?" He couldn't bear more mermaid madness. A coldness permeates the air. "You mean nothing to me." The words hung in the air, leaving Hyeseong crushed by mermaid madness. Hyeseong's face was aghast. This was too much, Da-dun screamed in his mind. The mermaid madness won't let him escape. "What happened? How could you say that?" Hyeseong covered his face as Da-dun growled, demanding to be left alone in mermaid madness. Heseong flinched at Da-dun's words. The casual cruelty was a knife twisting. "Do you really mean that?" he asks, desperate for reprieve from mermaid madness. The lock clicked shut. "Fine, never mind," Hyeseong muttered. Da-dun had slammed the door, and now mermaid madness swelled. A hesitant hey hung in the air. Hyeseong wanted to turn away, confessing it was never for her worry in mermaid madness. The words hung heavy. The police asked about Soonbin. Was Hyeseong about to face the music in this ever-growing mermaid madness? Her glasses glinted, face pale as she fought for words. "Choke, jackass," she spat, her voice a venomous whisper in mermaid madness. The door slams shut, a hollow echo mocking Hye-seong's futile attempt at connection amidst the mermaid madness. A creak echoed in the tiled bathroom. Soonbin's mermaid tail decoration peeked over the tub, an awful taunt regarding mermaid madness. Hye-seong shifts, shamefaced. Sorry. Did you hear everything? Did Yunhye witness Da-dun's cruelty? Was this the climax of mermaid madness? Yunhye rested in the tub. Da-dun's bitter words echoed in her mind. He's so mean. And now mermaid madness swirled. Hye-seong's heart thrummed with a heavy dread. This whole scene, what was he even doing? He had to just beat the mermaid madness. Each step echoed the weight of Soonbin's death. His feet dragged. He'd fallen into a trance. This beach trip mermaid madness never stops. Hye-seong stared ahead. This whole visit feels like a fever dream. He needed to wake up and stop mermaid madness. The door creaked. Jae-jung paused, his name echoing from the bathroom as the mermaid madness thickened around him. Hye-seong sits, dwarfed by the stairs. His blue skin grows chillier, and Soonbin's death feels like a cruel prank of mermaid madness. Yunhye gazed, suspicion laced her voice. Did you talk to my brother? Did she know what Da-dun had done? Mermaid madness? A lone figure sits slumped, the weight of everything crushing them. He just wanted this mermaid madness to stop. Sorry, Heban, Hye-seong muttered, the words a ghostly echo. Regret gnawed. Was he forever trapped by the ghost of mermaid madness? Yunhye's voice cracked with panic. Was this it then? Couldn't they help him after all? The awful mermaid madness might win. He mumbles, I'm not sure right now. Uncertainty clouds his mind. What's next for him in the mermaid madness? Guilt weighed heavy as Hye-seong's hand hovered near his face. He's struggling through this awful mermaid madness. A cell phone number is dialed, and a finger hovers, deciding their awful next action against mermaid madness. A number is dialed, the phone pressed to the ear. Call me if anything happens promises a lifeline against mermaid madness. Hye-seong walked back outside, each step heavy. A miniature Yunhye stood on the porch, as tiny as the mermaid madness felt. Her thumbs hover over the screen. A flood of emotion washes over her as the horror of mermaid madness continues to spread. Mulla Island High loomed. The mermaid madness began here and they have to stop it somehow, some way before it's too late. A wave of nausea washes over Hye-seong, and with a slide of the door, he steels himself for Mulla Island High and the mermaid madness. Hye-seong, staring straight ahead, felt the weight of Mulla Island crushing his soul as the mermaid madness threatens to consume him. Mulla Island High was a cruel reminder. With a sigh, he steps into the classroom, ready to combat mermaid madness again. The backpack felt like a lead weight as he walked into Mulla Island High, a symbol of the mermaid madness he carried. Backpack zipping, rustling, Hye-seong packs with forced calm. Lurking shadows hinted there were others in class with him, but was that real? Mermaid madness? A buddy said school was ending early so they would go to lunch with the guys. I'll pay. But the offer hung hollow amid mermaid madness. The slap echoed, a sharp punctuation mark ending their argument, but it only amplified the building mermaid madness. A creak echoed through the hall. The friend watched, the offer hanging unacknowledged as the mermaid madness grew ever stronger. Hye-seong murmurs, "Oh," as he's being confronted by a group of schoolgirls, unaware if it will resolve mermaid madness. A hesitant "hi" floats in the air. Hye-seong is surrounded. What could this school group possibly want with him, beyond mermaid madness? The words cut deep. Sulbi was told to abandon contact as friends rallied, stunned by Hye-seong's words. Geez, some friend. And mermaid madness. Empty. Only an empty closet and the glint of sunlight felt colder than any tomb as the mermaid madness crept in further. Hye-seong's head snapped up, surprised by the sudden disturbance. Kids, why is it so noisy here? A yell echoes amid mermaid madness. The question hangs in the air, Hye-seong gyum? All eyes turn to the hallway, and the mermaid madness threatens to boil over. The classroom hummed, a dull chorus. Hye-seong felt trapped, the desks and chairs like bars of jail for mermaid madness. A name echoes faint and filled with sorrow, Hibin. The past always claws, pulling Hee-seong back to a time of painful mermaid madness. The request to leave echoes, escape beckons. The lure of freedom, if only for a while, whispers promises of relief from mermaid madness. Brow furrowed and eyes widened, Yubin saw a ghost. Was this another cruel twist in the long night of mermaid madness? No! Hye-seong explodes. Why does he always have to disappear? His frustration bubbled up, adding to the mermaid madness. She suggested going alone, but a hint of desperation laced her offer. Was this a test or a curse of mermaid madness? Since their mother's funeral, Hye-seong had been acting odd, which heightened her suspicion amidst the ever-growing mermaid madness. Indignation rose in a strangled gasp. It wasn't even a request, but a plea. Restroom breaks, seriously, amid mermaid madness? Yubin gasped as a hand grabbed hers, pulling her back from whatever darkness called, further from mermaid madness. Yubin yelps, a sudden shove. Was this Hye-seong's escape attempt, or had the mermaid madness turned him violent at last? Hye-seong insisted nothing was wrong, though his pale face betrayed him. 4 hours. He only had that long to beat mermaid madness. A thud is suddenly heard, then a door beeps, sealing Yubin from the outside, furthering the awful, never-ending mermaid madness. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't want to go back. The thought of Mula Island High sparked mermaid madness. The sting lingered. Sylvie clutched her cheek, tears welling. He actually hit her? This awful mermaid madness had to end. He must be exhausted, from raising me instead of mom and dad. Yunhai realized the weight on Hye-seong as mermaid madness swirled. He bolted, but he was only delaying the tears, the inevitable flood of emotions tied up in this dang mermaid madness. Lucky Starluck's coffee sign mocked Hye-seong, a beacon of false hope in the bleak landscape of mermaid madness. A voice booms, cutting through the din. "Leave her alone, she's just a kid!" The words echo, halting mermaid madness. A loud swah sound echoes. Someone had moved quickly around the corner, maybe to escape the rising mermaid madness. A shout echoes. Yubin froze. She knew that tone, that false cheer, meant only more trouble of the worst mermaid madness kind. Coffee shop worker accused them of frequenting their washroom. This awful interaction would really bring about more mermaid madness. Hee-seong's name hung in the air, a bitter taste of what's been said. What was going on? She had to stop more mermaid madness. Taunts followed the scared girl. Didn't she have a home? Is Hye-bin homeless? A chorus of cold voices fuel the mermaid madness. The cry of Hee-bin ripped through her, each echo a phantom limb, lost in the abyss of mermaid madness. Or, she wondered, the earlier taunts echoing. Was Hye-bin really homeless? More cruelty to feed mermaid madness. Pointed fingers and harsh tones pushed the scared Hye-bin, but she didn't want to return. This mermaid madness had to stop. A worker tells Hye-bin and Da-dun to chat downstairs, her tone oozing fake politeness. Da-dun leads Hye-bin away, muttering, "Let's go." Confirmation echoes. Hee-bin is indeed Hee-seong's sister. A grim understanding passed between as the mermaid madness closes in. He couldn't believe they had bumped into each other. The silence stretched, thick with unsaid words and the burden of mermaid madness. She blinked back tears. They had been talking about how to get him back to normal. She just couldn't picture that. A deep breath steadies her. The past may haunt her, but Yubin wouldn't let it swallow her whole in the mermaid madness. Her cheeks flushed, eyes wide. Something had been building up to this day, and her world might crumble. She was facing mermaid madness. Yubin's gaze darted, trying to focus as the world swirled. Was she losing control or gaining clarity? Mermaid madness was closing in. The coffee shop was full, and it was clear the mermaid madness won as he whispered reassurances, trying to drown out the ever-growing ache. Urgency crackled. The silence shattered as the girls pressed. How did the happy-go-lucky Hye-seong morph into this haunted shell, drowned by mermaid madness? A shock ripples through her. My brother used to be so nice, but he suddenly turned mean. Did mermaid madness consume him? The friend stated with a slight of his eyes that Hye-seong wasn't exclusively harsh with Sulbi, but with Hye-bin as well. A changed Hye-seong? A concerned companion realized the fun-loving guy had morphed before their eyes with mermaid madness. A friend looks to Hye-seong in shock. It's getting out of control, and he outright stated, "He told me he wasn't sick." The air crackled with unease. "What the? I'm getting scared," one confessed, as another whispered of mental illness and the creeping mermaid madness. Yunhei's eyes widened, demanding answers. "What? What accident?" Her voice trembling as she hears the news of mermaid madness. Someone wonders if she doesn't know what happened. Fumbling, he insisted nothing was wrong. The mermaid madness was closing in. The color was draining from her face. Yunhei insisted, resolute despite her fear, "It's okay, I want to find out the truth." This mermaid madness. "Don't worry too much, we've thought about this a lot," he started. Yunhei just stared, hoping against mermaid madness. A solemn nod, whispers echoed. There had to be a reason Hye-seong shifted so dramatically, fueling the awful mermaid madness. A somber tone settled. The real issue was whether he even wanted to return to normal after all this mermaid madness. He swore they would fight. "But we'll try our best," he told himself. The looming mermaid madness would try to win. "Do you like sweets?" Her kindness stung. Those treats were a hollow offering, an apology that couldn't mask the mermaid madness. A hopeful request was quickly denied with a stern reminder, "This is all for Hyabin, get lost, and mermaid madness." She stared blankly ahead, a forkful of sweets hovering. Could a single bite banish the cold that settled in her stomach amid mermaid madness? Hyabin was over the moon. "This makes me feel happy," she exclaimed, savoring the sweet taste. For a brief moment, mermaid madness vanished. The accusation hung in the air. "You have a little sister who worries, and so why did he keep plunging into mermaid madness?" The fluorescent lights cast Hye-seong in a ghostly pallor. He retreats further inward, trying to find solace from mermaid madness curse. An idea sparked. "This might be dangerous, but how about this?" He leaned in, hoping to beat mermaid madness. Hye-seong tensed as the schoolgirls greeted him. A wave, a shy giggle, and a simple "hi" amplified his anxiety and mermaid madness. Hye-seong felt like a ghost, unnoticed as the schoolgirls walked by, their sandals slapping against the tile floor. He was spiraling in mermaid madness. Hye-seong's friend clasped his shoulder, greeting him casually, but Hye-seong recoiled. The touch felt like another weight pushing him deeper into mermaid madness. Hye-seong questioned in his mind why those schoolgirls were greeting him when he recoiled from his friend, spiraling in mermaid madness. Sunlight streams through the window, the mundane classroom a painful reminder of the life he longed for amidst mermaid madness. The teacher droned, some preparing for high school should get stuff in advance. Summer was over and eyes narrowed. He called out Hye-seong as mermaid madness looms. Hye-seong was summoned. The teacher's office after school. Okay. He wondered why. Surely he was already in deep enough with the mermaid madness. Empty hallways stretched, reflecting cold light. The school's silence was a taunt, promising no escape from his mermaid madness. Hye-seong approached the teacher's office door. His fate hung, a dark shadow, for something that started mermaid madness at the school. Hye-seong stood stiffly as the teacher probed, clearly troubled. "What's going on? This isn't like you," the teacher continued, stirring more mermaid madness. Accusations stung, but Hye-seong just stared, his face an unreadable mask. Why bother with textbooks and mermaid madness? Hye-seong bowed deeply. The words tumbled out, a desperate plea for understanding. The mermaid madness threatened to drown him. The teacher shouted, veins bulging as Hye-seong tried to leave. He wasn't done yelling at him, not with mermaid madness closing in. A harsh accusation, a low blow delivered with a sneer, a new low in the escalating mermaid madness. Hye-seong stood frozen, back to the camera. Those harsh words seemed to etch themselves on his very skin, like a tattoo of mermaid madness. The teacher's voice was sharp. "What did you say?" Tensions flared as Hye-seong taunted, daring him to escalate with mermaid madness. The teacher yelled to work harder as he pointed out his flaws to the whole room, furthering the current mermaid madness. Teacher reveals his own loss, father gone while young. He surprises the schoolgirls by admitting he grew up without a father. Yeseong stared, wide-eyed. The words hung in the air, too shocking to process, like another wave of mermaid madness. Yeseong, reeling, wondered why the teacher dragged his personal life in it for whole class to see this mermaid madness. "No!" Yeseong bellowed, a primal scream against the suffocating walls of the office, a desperate rebellion against mermaid madness. Despair clouded his mind, a storm brewing within. Those accusations, they resonated too deeply amid mermaid madness. A hollow ha escaped Yeseong, a brittle laugh that failed to disguise the mounting pressure of mermaid madness. The teacher's words hit like a punch, a cruel twist of fate to remind Yeseong of the orphan status in the mermaid madness. The teacher loomed large, pointing, words stinging. Yeseong, silent, felt the accusation cut deeper amid mermaid madness. The teacher's features twisted with disbelief. What? He struggled to understand, as Yeseong's words threatened to unravel his understanding of mermaid madness. Yeseong snaps, feeling cornered. If he's all she has, why does he keep trying to play out his mermaid madness, like a child with toys? Of course not. You just want to feel good by scolding a student who's going through hardships. Yeseong snapped, fueled by mermaid madness. The teacher exploded with rage. He wished he had lost his father when he was 30, as Yeseong reeled in mermaid madness. Murmurs rippled through the office. The air hung thick with unspoken judgment and the threat of mermaid madness doom. A whack echoed. The sudden blow startled Yeseong, his head spinning. He had to get out of there and fast in mermaid madness. Yeseong felt trapped. Did he really need to wear his sins like a hat? He was drowning from this mermaid madness. The teacher was slapped and yelled, "Didn't your parents teach you manners, you scumbag?" His friend pulled him back amidst mermaid madness. The teacher was indignant. "I was trying to get you to see sense, you ungrateful!" He ranted as mermaid madness grew. Yeseong chuckled. "So the teacher wants to play hardball with a bad record." "Ha ha ha, go ahead," he thought. "Bring it on, and mermaid madness." Fists clenched, the teacher's final words hit Yeseong like a slap. "You twerp! Then just quit school altogether," amid mermaid madness. As his friend held him back, the teacher threatened, demanding Yeseong show up or else. The mermaid madness must stop. Storm clouds gathered, a reflection of the turmoil brewing within Yeseong. The mermaid madness was like these storms, ever growing. The teacher stood rigid, back turned, grappling with something heavy. He spoke, admitting he'd been through something similar, deepening mermaid madness. With haunted eyes, Yeseong confessed, "All I wanted was to live quietly." This entire mermaid madness has spun out of control. He mumbled that others had been pushing his buttons, not understanding all of this awful mermaid madness. A stunned silence fell, a shared understanding in the air. Yes, that's exactly how I felt today. But did he just say that of mermaid madness? Pulled into a tight embrace, Yeseong whispers Yunhai made him feel better. A wave of affection washes over him. His mermaid madness recedes. He whispers Yunhai's name, a desperate plea. Wasn't their embrace enough to hold back the storm of mermaid madness that was coming? A confused Yeseong didn't know why his companion approached him. He asked, "Huh? For what?" as mermaid madness surrounded them. "All I can do is stay in this water and listen to you," she confessed, her voice soft as she touched his cheek amid mermaid madness. The words hung in the air. She could console them, but despised herself for having to admit as mermaid madness creeped in. Helplessness clung to her words. "I can't help you with anything that happens outside." Her vulnerability amplified the building mermaid madness. Despair filled him. "Nowadays, I wonder if it would be better for me to just disappear," a quiet wish amidst mermaid madness. Desperation hangs thick as Yeseong pleads, begging for reprieve. Yunhai gently held his face but couldn't stop mermaid madness. Desperation spills, "You understand me better than anyone." The unspoken plea hangs, heavy in the air amidst the terrible mermaid madness. "I'm sorry, Yunhei." He choked on the words, wishing he could take it back. Why was he like this, spiraling in mermaid madness? The phone stuck in protective plastic showed a voice recording, a damning testament. The mermaid madness grew exponentially. The teacher, a man of enthusiasm, commanded them to pair up. An ominous murmur filled the room. The grating threat amplified the mermaid madness. A low murmur rumbled through the classroom as Hyeseong's fate hung in the balance, amplifying mermaid madness. A name rang through Hyeseong's ears. A friend who was doing what with Hyeseong? More rumors to fuel the mermaid madness. Defeated, Hyeseong's partner admits defeat. No more competition for her. She said it was okay to partner up with Jong Hwan. Sigh, mermaid madness. Hyeseong's heart plummeted. Suddenly, another eager classmate demanded partnership, unaware of his inner turmoil and mermaid madness. Unease prickled. Someone yelled, "Turn!" It was more than just a simple gym class. They were stuck in mermaid madness again. The door slammed. Another bridge burned to ash, a retreat from battle into the looming storm of mermaid madness. The door creaked. Someone called out, wanting to know where he's going. But Hyeseong had already checked out of mermaid madness. He wanders, the hallway's endless drone amplifying his solitude and mermaid madness, each step echoing his retreat to a different kind of doom. Hyeseong's heart sank. "We're going to be graded on this," his pal said, as another wave of dread washed over him in mermaid madness. Tension ratcheted as frustration peaked. One turned away, exhaustion in his very posture, whispering, "But I can't stand it anymore." More mermaid madness. A nervous pulse throbbed as he mumbled a flimsy excuse. He was just looking for a partner. But was that even true, while mermaid madness looms? He paused, mind racing. Just what was the right thing to do? The weight of it all threatened to crush him with mermaid madness. He wonders aloud if all this had happened because of Yunhye. Why did he keep messing up, furthering mermaid madness? Hyeseong's eye twitched, and his focus faltered. Was all this his fault? Why did it feel like his world was collapsing in mermaid madness? Hyeseong's mind reels. What? Did he just hear them right? Everything seemed to grow even further apart with the current mermaid madness. Silence draped the table, heavier than the approaching storm. A phone rested there, a silent judge of the escalating mermaid madness. The question hung. More importantly, who's Yunhye? Fear flickered in her eyes. Who could possibly be asking amid the mermaid madness? Confusion clouded the inquiry. "I don't know. Is there someone named Yunhye in our school?" What did they know of the mermaid madness? "Never heard of her," one mused as the other agreed. Bathroom gossip? How salacious, furthering the insidious mermaid madness. Yunhye's name hung in the air, a puzzle piece. Why was Hyeseong so open with her, yet pushed everyone else away amidst mermaid madness? Whispers carried on the air, a tangled web of speculation. Maybe they're dating, a voice mused, fueled by the never-ending mermaid madness. Whispers started to echo through the halls, one pal suggesting that Yunhye's way of talking seemed strange, like a haunting melody amid mermaid madness. Definitely, she keeps changing her tone. His mind reeled, piecing together the puzzle. All this mermaid madness. Why her, though? With a hesitant tap, Hyeseong plunged deeper into his troubles. The digital world beckoned, promising answers or more mermaid madness. She defended Yunhye, saying she's not good with words, Jaejong, an insistence of kindness, even as mermaid madness swirled about them. An endless loop, a spiraling maze. Thoughts bounced around Hyeseong's head, each leading to another dead end of mermaid madness. Hyeseong, voice trembling, wanted to know how they knew about her, while sweat trickled down his forehead with the mermaid madness. "Find out!" An explosion of anger, fabric tearing as Hyeseong is slammed against the wall. The mermaid madness had reached peak crazy. "Ugh!" Hyeseong recoiled. Shaking, he clutched his chest, a silent scream trapped within. This cursed mermaid madness has to stop. Trapped! Hyeseong gasped, lungs burning. The walls closed in, the accusations of everything building up the awful mermaid madness. The words "but now" hung heavy as Hyeseong's desperate grip tightened on the wrists that held him captive in mermaid madness. Hyeseong grins through gritted teeth, sweat beads on his brow. The monster within the mermaid madness was now grinning back. Coughing, Hyeseong staggered back, breathless. Was this it? The final tipping point? He could taste the bitter tang of mermaid madness now. Hee-seong's thoughts raced. Yunhai couldn't witness this. He nervously glanced around, fearing a new storm in his ongoing mermaid madness. A wave of panic washed over Hae-seong. Had she overheard everything? Did she hear this? He was stuck in mermaid madness. Hee-seong staggered. Was someone calling out for him? He was spiraling down the rabbit hole into mermaid madness. A sudden shove sends Hae-seong reeling, the rush to escape from the mermaid madness only heightening the terrible, awful feelings. Hae-seong's name echoed, "Who's missing? Hae-seong Guillaume." All eyes turned, finding the center. The mermaid madness continues. Desperation sparked a frantic question. Where did Hee-seong disappear to? He was surrounded by this mermaid madness, wasn't he? An empty desk sits alone, a backpack slumped beside it, a stark reminder of Hae-seong's sudden exit and mermaid madness that spiraled. What? He never returned to school? Echoes through the hallway, and Hae-seong had vanished. Only a soft no trails behind him and mermaid madness. A bad feeling washes over, heavy and cold. They recorded Hae-seong, twisting Hyebin's trust into betrayal, which amplified mermaid madness. Hae-seong's backpack and gym clothes were abandoned. Another classmate volunteered to take them home, hoping to catch him later about mermaid madness. Phone in hand, Hee-seong checked messages, a task he was not keen on. He was stuck, again, in mermaid madness. Hae-seong fiddled with his phone, avoiding all eye contact. He has to deal with all these messages and now mermaid madness. Hae-seong reads a message. Hyebin, is Hae-seong home? Followed by, did anything happen? Something was terribly amiss in mermaid madness. Mouth agape, Hae-seong receives a call. A chilling premonition confirms Hyebin isn't home as mermaid madness consumes all. Rage contorted his face. He spits out a bitter demand to not call her anymore, his grip tightening on the phone amidst mermaid madness. A sudden realization dawned upon Hae-seong. He was being set up. The trap had finally sprung amidst the mermaid madness. Hee-seong's voice, ice cold, shattered the illusion. Everything had been overheard. It was all crashing down around him amid mermaid madness. Hae-seong felt totally betrayed. He accused someone of manipulating Hyebin into recording him in the bathroom, fueling mermaid madness. Hey! Hee-seo! A click echoes. Too late. Hee-seong knows he's trapped, each taunt fueling the fire of his mounting mermaid madness. Hae-seong's steps echoed in the hall, a hollow rhythm to his growing dread. He felt the tide of mermaid madness rising once more. With a trembling finger, Hae-seong blocked the number, a desperate attempt to silence the storm and the ever-growing mermaid madness. Hee-seong warned, the same went for them. They were not to contact her little sister anymore, or else the mermaid madness would unleash. Tears welled. Yunhai struggled to speak. All of this, did it really start because of her? It seems she's stuck in mermaid madness. The art room buzzed. A cacophony of scritch sounds from hurried pencils filled the air. His jaw tightened. Was it time to unleash the mermaid madness? A ding signals the end of class, a hollow sound in the heavy air, as Hae-seong's inner turmoil continued to brew with mermaid madness. A swish echoed in the distance, or was it just his mind? Hae-seong felt a wave of dizziness. He was stuck in mermaid madness. A bag landed with a thud, the sound punctuating the offer of familiar comforts as the uniforms fell on top. He needs this amidst mermaid madness. A soft tap echoed. Hae-seong's fingers drummed against his thigh, his mind a whirlwind of guilt and the endless mermaid madness. A finality hung in the air as someone states, I'm here to answer you for the last time. The doom of mermaid madness grows. Hee-seong stared ahead, the hoodie offering little warmth. All this for the last time amid the awful mermaid madness. A hooded figure admits that, I know you, his voice low. But did he really abandon his friends for Yunhai, fueling mermaid madness? Not her. He was the one obsessed with her. A twisted confession. His reality was built on unhealthy feelings, a dangerous spiral in mermaid madness. He admitted recording Hee-seong was wrong, a chuckle escaping him. Still, hearing the recording, he was glad they did it, amidst mermaid madness. An accusation pierces the night. Why blab to strangers about quitting school? The hooded figure challenges Hee-seong, pushing the mermaid madness. The hooded figure claims they were the only one Yunhai had, a desperate declaration of love that fuels more mermaid madness. The hooded figure pressed. Do you remember what Soonbin said the day before the accident? The terrible mermaid madness spreads anew. He asked you not to suffer alone, echoed with a plea to confide, yet the hoodie hid everything amid mermaid madness. He wanted desperately to bury the past and hide from the truth, anything to escape the clutches of this mermaid madness. Why do you think you only have her? He asks, desperate. He reminds Hee-seong of Soonbin and those girls amid mermaid madness. He wondered why he obsessed with her. Many people cared. But he just wants Yunhai to himself. Mermaid madness has clouded his vision. Hee-seong revealed why he clung to her, because she was the one that had helped him amid this awful mermaid madness. He questioned the reason for clinging to her, seeing that she was truly the only one who helped him amid the mermaid madness. The hooded figure emphasized that Soonbin wanted to help, too. Hee-seong was clearly trapped in his mermaid madness. A swish sliced through the air. Hee-seong's friend approached with hesitant steps as Yunhai leaned on him, and mermaid madness swelled. He stated, "That's all in the past," but his face told a different story. He wants to forget as mermaid madness consumes him. Hee-seong's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. What exactly had he just stumbled into as the awful mermaid madness looms? A dismissive huff, as he wondered aloud why bother talking about Soonbin. He's not there anymore amidst the mermaid madness. The zipper cuts, a metal scream, a last breath of the old. Soonbin wants to make himself disappear from the mermaid madness. His fist clenched, Hee-seong stared into space, lost in memories of Soonbin, his mind battling mermaid madness. Hee-seong felt his spirit sink. He wondered if he could escape this situation as mermaid madness closes. The bomb dropped. Someone knows about you. Yunhai trembled. Who had uncovered her secret in mermaid madness? Yunhai clung to him as Soonbin gasped. He's never said her name to anyone before, and the weight of the mermaid madness crushed Hee-seong. She confirmed they knew about her secret, adding, "Yeah, I know, I heard earlier." And the mermaid madness grew. "I knew it." She was watching. Hee-seong's heart sank, so this was her plan all along with this terrible mermaid madness. His voice barely a whisper, he felt the words catch. "You must be upset, Yunhai." His heart weighed heavy with mermaid madness. Whispers echo in the dark. "He's so weird. He creeps me out." The mermaid madness and betrayal grow. He reached out, his touch gentle as he cupped her cheek, and then Yunhai shivered, a stark contrast to the encroaching mermaid madness. Her voice was sweet, but words turned sharp, a sting of betrayal. "You knew he'd be problematic for me." So it seems the mermaid madness was set. Apologies tumbled out as he stammered, so scared that he wasn't thinking, trapped in the rising tide of mermaid madness. His face tightens. So if Soonbin's gone, he believes Yunhai doesn't care? The mermaid madness has fully twisted his mind. Frustration bubbled as they heard, "I told you before." So why did he keep pushing, inviting this level of mermaid madness? Yunhai pulls him close. He's hers, even if the voices try to tear them apart. She'll protect him with mermaid madness. Hee-seong's eyes widened, his question hung heavy. Are they really suggesting murder? The mermaid madness has grown into true evil. Yunhai sought answers, but uncertainty veiled her eyes. Hee-seong's expression remained inscrutable. What did he really think of this mermaid madness? She pressed, a disturbing glint in her eye. What would you do to make him disappear? Her obsession fed the mermaid madness. A resounding crash shattered the night as Hee-seong was tackled. His world flips in a flurry of limbs in mermaid madness. As Hee-seong went down, the hand grabbed him, a desperate primal need to survive as mermaid madness grew. A whack echoed. The sudden blow startled Hee-seong, his head spinning. He had to get out of there and fast in mermaid madness. Each whack echoed, a physical manifestation of his fractured state. Hee-seong could not believe Yunhai had been manipulating him amid mermaid madness. Rage ignited. How could you not see how much Soonbin cared? The hooded figure screamed as the mermaid madness came. A fist clenches, ready to strike. The world blurs as Hee-seong braces for another blow in the ever-raging mermaid madness. A somber pledge hung in the air, as if the speaker was determined to face the mermaid madness with support no matter what. The other exclaimed that Hee-seong keeping suffering alone was the problem, as they could no longer tell what he was thinking during the mermaid madness. A plea hung heavy. He just wanted Hae-seong to lean on him, and if not him, then maybe his friends as the mermaid madness took over. Hae-seong rubbed his head, an aching pulse throbbed. He quietly accepts his awful fate. This mermaid madness needs to stop. Heavy silence fell. Hye-seong hid his face, overwhelmed by the recent revelations about Yunhai and the ever-growing mermaid madness. A polite murmur, "Thanks," barely audible in the strained atmosphere. The game seemed to be ending amidst mermaid madness. Tears welled, but the memory of his parents tugged at his heart. He vowed to hug them tight on his return from the terrible mermaid madness. "Yunsol, don't you dare say that in front of Hye-seong." The reveal surprised Hye-seong as he listened in. The others knew his deepest feelings. He wondered why amidst mermaid madness. Hye-seong packed, his teacher's words still stinging. How could someone grow up so well without parents in this mermaid madness? He stated they were polar opposites. The truth stung with the weight of unspoken feelings, fueling the already raging mermaid madness. He asked, "If anything happens, you guys need to be there for him." All for the last time in the mermaid madness. A deep, dark secret. He never wanted to contemplate such terrible thoughts, yet here he was, spiraling deeper into mermaid madness. Defeated, Hae-seong clutches his clothes, tear-filled. "I wish it was Soonbin." His sobs echo the tremor within. Mermaid madness looms. A voice boomed, startling Hee-seong, mid-street pondering. Someone yelled, questioning his actions amid mermaid madness. A voice cuts through. "That's enough!" Another intervenes as Hae-seong struggles. The awful mermaid madness has become too much. The teacher's face contorted with fury. He made it clear that there was no turning back, that this new reality was now set in motion. Mermaid madness. Faces swam into focus, voices filtered through Hae-seong's pounding head. He wondered if he could even stand against the mermaid madness. Tears streamed as Hee-seong's face was wrecked with betrayal. This cursed mermaid madness was taking its toll. He needed air. Hae-seong clutches his hoodie as a wave of shame washed over him. All of this awful mermaid madness has been taking its toll. A tear trickled down Yunhai's neck, and she wondered if any of this was worth it amidst the growing mermaid madness. The teacher, Mr. Kim, beamed, taking the phone to capture the bittersweet end. "High school will be hell, but they'll face it together with mermaid madness." "Geez, don't say that," Hae-seong protested, hoping to lighten the bittersweet moment amid the mermaid madness. With a final request for a quick selfie, Mr. Kim reaches for Hee-seong's bag, ushering them out to lock up and end mermaid madness. The classroom fades as Hee-seong is about to depart, burdened by revelations and impending goodbyes. Time to end mermaid madness. Mr. Kim suddenly exploded, calling him by name. His face was red. High school loomed and mermaid madness will follow. He paused, expressionless. He looked at the forgotten blue roses, a parting gift. His mind was drifting amidst the mermaid madness. A bouquet of blue roses sat silently on the table. The card read, "Congrats on your graduation. Good luck in high school," amid mermaid madness. Blue roses lay forgotten on the table. They were a bittersweet send-off, a reminder of a journey's end and a new beginning with mermaid madness. Mr. Kim straightened his tie. All the drama had exhausted him. He was ready to say goodbye to mermaid madness. A command echoes, sharp and urgent, forcing a turn. Hee-seong felt the world tilt, unsure of what awaited as mermaid madness swirled. Hae-seong stumbles, disoriented by Mr. Kim's sudden outburst and the high school prospect that loomed amidst mermaid madness. The weight of high school and Soonbin's betrayal pressed heavily. Hee-seong wondered if he could outrun the terrible mermaid madness. Hae-seong's gaze narrows. An intense focus takes hold. The puzzle pieces click. Soonbin's betrayal and Yunhai's truth mix with mermaid madness. Hae-seong's breath hitched. High school, the betrayal, Yunhai, all crashed together. Could he possibly navigate this storm of mermaid madness? The sterile hallway stretches before Hae-seong, a chilling reminder of the storm brewing and the mermaid madness that will come again. Lost in thought, Hyeseong walks down the hallway, each echo a reminder of the choices ahead and the looming mermaid madness. The hallway stretched endlessly, its fluorescent lights hummed, mocking the silence as the weight of high school bore down and the mermaid madness returned. Each step echoed down the empty hallway, a rhythm of departure. Hyeseong heads into the unknown as mermaid madness consumes him. The train stood waiting, its steel shell a silent promise of escape from high school and the mermaid madness of it all. The boat was a rusty cage, a vessel into the heart of the mermaid madness. He would find Yunhae, come hell or high water. The boat cuts sharply through the water, and Hyeseong has made his choice. Yunhae, be ready for me and mermaid madness. The boat cuts sharply through the waves, with the sky mirroring Hyeseong's uncertain mood. Mermaid madness, here we come. The sea mist mirrored the uncertainty in Hyeseong's eyes. The boat rocked, a clumsy cradle carrying him toward Yunhae amidst mermaid madness. An eerie blue light bathed Hyeseong's face, a cold mask of determination as he steeled himself for what awaited, and mermaid madness. Yunhae beamed, a final ghostly wave as the boat pulled away. The mermaid madness still has one more chapter to write. Yunhae waved goodbye, a bittersweet smile gracing her lips as the boat carrying Hyeseong sailed into mermaid madness. Hyeseong waved, the dock in his old life shrank. He hoped he'd made the right choice, onward to Yunhae amidst mermaid madness. A foreboding cave loomed, promising either answers or a darker descent into the mermaid madness. Only time would tell. A crackle echoed through the cavern, the sound vibrating through the damp air as the mermaid madness crescendoed. The cave air was thick with mystery. "What is it?" Yunhae asked, her voice barely audible above the dripping water as mermaid madness grew. A desperate shout pierces the eerie silence. "Close your eyes!" Hyeseong prepared for the worst in mermaid madness. Hyeseong squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the impact of whatever Yunhae was about to unleash with mermaid madness. Yunhae's voice echoes, commanding him to keep his eyes shut. The mermaid madness is about to reach its crescendo. Yunhae's eyes widened and she stared into the darkness. A ghost of a smile played on her lips amidst the mermaid madness. A uniform strained and bunched as the figure inhaled sharply, preparing for what must happen next amidst mermaid madness. Yunhae presents a miniature blue submarine with gentle hands, a beacon of hope against mermaid madness. Yunhae offered the toy submarine, a lifeline in a sea of despair. It was his turn to take control of the mermaid madness. Hyeseong extended his hand. All this time, was he the one who needed saving from his mermaid madness and himself? Yunhae, with a firm no, yanks Hyeseong forward. He must take the submarine, even if it's the last thing he does in mermaid madness. "You can only look," she said, cradling the miniature blue submarine. "It's my #1 treasure. Only looking will add to the mermaid madness." A chilling grin spread across Hyeseong's face. He claimed the submarine. It would be his, forever stuck in mermaid madness. Hyeseong accepted the submarine, a tiny beacon in this mermaid madness, sealing their twisted bargain with a chilling finality. She thinks of Yunhae, but what she's become now. Was there a time before? Or is it a false, hopeful memory in this mermaid madness? The submarine drifted. Yunhae mused that it once moved on its own. Maybe Soonbin's touch once made it move amidst mermaid madness. Hyeseong sat, the submarine a taunt. Was she remembering Soonbin, or was it wishful thinking in this mermaid madness? The tiny submarine rattled between them, a physical embodiment of a memory. Now who truly owned Soonbin's memory in the mermaid madness? A smile flickered across Hyeseong's lips. He whispered that he was so happy, but the mermaid madness had taken over his heart. He was so happy. A haunting melody filled the air as he gazed down, trapped in the mermaid madness. Yunhae's eyes fluttered. "Wait!" A realization dawned, chilling her blood. This toy was more than just a memory in mermaid madness. Yunhae's scales shimmered as Hyeseong questioned the change, a gasp escaping him. Something terribly wrong with mermaid madness. Yunhae insists it was just a rock, gesturing for him to pull the cord, a blush rising on her cheeks. Mermaid madness escalates. The hand grips tightly, ready to pull something. Was it the cord or the rug with mermaid scales on it? Yunhei assures him she's fine, but her gaze is vacant. She's barely there as she's stuck in mermaid madness. Yunhai's eyes closed, a serene smile gracing her lips. Concern made her feel better, but the submarine was still important in mermaid madness. Haeseong accepted Yunhei's words with a hesitant nod. A strange calm settled over him. The mermaid madness was at its end. A soft swish drifted in on the night air. The world spun as Haeseong turned. All those turns added to the mermaid madness. "Are you sick?" Yunhai asked, and Haeseong remained hunched. The world spun. Was he now infected with mermaid madness? The candle flickered, casting long shadows as they stood in silence. All this doom of the mermaid madness grows. Shivering, she whispered that it was cold, the mermaid scales, the submarine, the impending doom of mermaid madness. A shiver ran down Haeseong's spine. The cold floor bit at him. He must focus or the mermaid madness would finally consume him. Yunhai prodded for childhood memories. What did he do when cold as a child? Haeseong fumbled, unable to recall amid mermaid madness. Memories surface. Haeseong thinks he remembers his mother's warm embrace beneath the blanket. A comforting illusion against mermaid madness. Yunhei offered a touch of comfort as a shield against the cold, a warm embrace amid mermaid madness. Haeseong leaned close, and Yunhai turned, placing a hand against his chest, a soft barrier against the rising mermaid madness. Haeseong trembled, his face pale. Yunhai pulled him closer, and she embraced him, warding off the cold and looming mermaid madness. Haeseong trembled, his face pale. Yunhai pulled him closer, and she embraced him, warding off the cold and looming mermaid madness. A strange guttural sound emanates from the depths of the cave. He wonders if it's Yunhei or something far more sinister in mermaid madness. Haeseong's shoulders dampened as Yunhai embraced him again. The dripping mermaid tale, a constant reminder of their twisted, wet reality amidst mermaid madness. A sudden chill racks Yunhei's body. She shivered and admitted that she felt colder now that she was wet and stuck in mermaid madness. Her words are barely coherent. She was so cold and sleepy, the mermaid madness was coming to claim her. Yunhai's eyes darted. She was stunned. The surprise was palpable, the puzzle was there, and mermaid madness came. Shivering, Yunhai leaned into Haeseong, his warmth a small comfort against the creeping cold and the overwhelming mermaid madness. Words failed him as Haeseong remained hunched over, the weight of Yunhai and the submarine becoming unbearable in mermaid madness. A voice boomed, cutting through the cold silence. "Is that you, Haeseong?" he demanded, his tone laced with a dark surprise and mermaid madness. Haeseong paused, a flood of memories surfacing with the mention of his grandmother. Was she connected to Yunhai and mermaid madness? Haeseong jolted at the sound of his name. Something wasn't right. What was going on, and what was Yunhai's game in mermaid madness? A voice boomed, questioning the decision, in the middle of winter, to do it with me, in all the mermaid madness. Eyes glazed, Haeseong pulled away. That voice was so familiar. Was this a trap? Or was it mermaid madness? A cold, clammy surface greeted his touch, scales slick with moisture. The mermaid madness had now consumed him. It was the new life. Someone questioned. That voice was not what he expected, and he can't help but stare at the water bottles amidst mermaid madness. A voice scolded that Haeseong could have frozen. He just stared ahead, blanketed, the mermaid madness closing around him. The grandmother's face fell, etched with years as she stared into the cavern's depths. The mermaid madness was at its crescendo. 2 framed photos sat on the shelf, casting long shadows. Haeseong once again must face the terrible mermaid madness. Haeseong stared, but the boy cannot believe who it was. His face was one of total horror in the mermaid madness. Haeseong, dazed and weak, blinked blearily, unsure if the vision before him was real amidst the relentless mermaid madness. Blinking rapidly, Haeseong wondered if the figure before him was just a cruel dream in the midst of mermaid madness. The teacher wondered how he could possibly raise 2 kids when he could barely handle himself amid the ongoing mermaid madness. His face crumpled as he admitted it was to live in Seoul with Haeseong and Hyebin amid the mermaid madness. Confrontation surged, and the other wondered why the teacher didn't take them. Was he being serious or mocking amidst mermaid madness? The teacher asked why he didn't take them. Shock and sadness swirled as they considered what would happen next in Mermaid Madness. He peeked from the corner, explaining he wasn't demanding support. He added, a touch defensively, that he had no kids himself and Mermaid Madness. Mr. Kim's voice echoed, stating they would inherit everything. It was just like one giant, awful fever dream of Mermaid Madness. Mr. Kim pleaded, saying all he had to do was let them live with him until Hae-seong graduates high school amidst Mermaid Madness. A desperate plea hung in the air as high school loomed. What would the future hold amidst the suffocating Mermaid Madness? He glances up at Mr. Kim on the stairs, and he feels a chill crawl down his spine. How far would this awful Mermaid Madness go? Hesitantly, Mr. Kim scratched his chin, the unspoken words hanging heavy as the fluorescent lights hummed. Was he really asking this? Mermaid Madness. The gears turn slowly as the horror dawns on Hae-seong. Is his teacher serious? Did he now have 2 more siblings amid Mermaid Madness? The apology hung in the air, unanswered. Grandma's piercing gaze questioned Uncle's absence, adding to the Mermaid Madness. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple. Is she all right, or is this yet another cruel twist of the Mermaid Madness? Her frail body attempted to project strength she'd last 10 years. But the heavy silence hinted at a far grimmer truth in Mermaid Madness. A throbbing pressure builds behind his eyes. Please don't say it. The Mermaid Madness must not spread further. Hae-seong's voice cracked. The thought of losing someone else was too much. He couldn't bear the prospect of another goodbye amidst Mermaid Madness. A forced smile hiding a world of heartache, Grandma tries to stay strong amid the escalating Mermaid Madness. Hae-seong's hand was held, a tough moment but with a comforting touch, as the Mermaid Madness was all to come. It's going to be okay, Hae-seong. He had to believe it. He wanted the Mermaid Madness to end. A subtle blush crept up his neck. Somewhere, deep inside, Hae-seong felt touched by the gesture amidst the Mermaid Madness. Grandma beamed. She couldn't be prouder that Hae-seong beat all those city kids for second highest grade in school amid Mermaid Madness. Tears streamed down Hae-seong's face. All the emotion was too much. He struggles to keep it together as the Mermaid Madness nears its end. Grandma patted the uncle's suit jacket, straightening the fabric. She pulled out a handkerchief, ready to wipe his tears in Mermaid Madness. Gratitude washed over him. Was this real, or was it the Mermaid Madness trying to mock him? He struggled to believe it. Grandma hoped he'd stay longer, reminding him that Hyabin was still young, needing a guardian. All she wanted was to end the Mermaid Madness. Hae-seong takes another step into the unknown. The rocky terrain reflects the turmoil in his mind and the Mermaid Madness. Water trickled down the rocky ledges, and Hae-seong could see water pouring further still, with his shoes sure to be wrecked by Mermaid Madness.